My check. Good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock. I am going to call our special committee of the whole meeting for budget for Tuesday, March 26th to order. I'm Kevin Murdoch, the Mayor of Oak Bay. We have all of council here in the chambers. As we call the meeting to order, we do just want to acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and the Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we acknowledge the Lekwungen people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, and their connections to these lands continue to this day. First order of business is approval of the agenda for this meeting. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Mayor's remarks. I don't have any remarks tonight, other than I'm hopeful that we get through the capital discussion in a reasonably timely fashion and can perhaps get to the broader budget discussion. We do have a meeting scheduled for Thursday. We do not necessarily have to have it, but certainly if there's items that require clarification or information back, we would like to make those as clear as possible so we could come back on Thursday and resolve them if at all possible. I'm sorry, we may just be here until Thursday. Is that the threat? That's entirely. We had a very late night last night. We were here till after midnight, so we'll try not to do that again. So with that, item 4.1, the budget overview. And just for members of the public that are either online or in person that wish to address council on the budget, what we're going to be doing is a general overview with the presentation. We have a chance to ask some questions, council does. We're going to get presentations from the GVPL, the Public Library, and the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association with their budgets. And then we'll come back to the primary capital budgets. I will allow public input at least 2 times, if not more, during the course of the capital budget discussion, just to make sure that we have people have ample opportunity to speak. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Payne, our Director of Director of Finance and Asset Management. Welcome.
Much of the information that's within the PowerPoint presentation we did cover in the first meeting, and if there's a desire to be expedient, much of it we can cycle through rather quickly. There are some changes, some council decisions that were made, and other updates that are noted in the PowerPoint. So I'll go through that, and then after that we can continue on with the remainder of the agenda. So we usually begin our budget discussions to talk about our budget principles. Those principles are well documented in our financial plan, and they've been consistent at the district for several years now. So for anyone who's interested in what guides the budget development, those are well documented. So I'm going to go through that slide. Same with the budget process. So just a reminder to the public and to council, public input is welcome at any stage. We've received some correspondence since the last budget deliberation, and there's participation here, and there's also often participation at the council meetings that result from the budget bylaw preparation. We endeavor to prepare an entire financial plan for review so that council and the community can weigh priorities in the context of the entire financial plan, rather than building it from the ground up and making decisions as we go along. The entire financial plan is prepared, and it's the objective is that it encapsulates all council direction since the last financial plan was prepared. So our preliminary timeline, we went through the operating budget at the last meeting. We're hoping to get through the capital budget tonight, if possible. There is another meeting scheduled on Thursday if we need to continue with capital or any of the additional wrap-up information. And we do have a bit of time in April to wrap up the budget if need be, but we need to prepare budget bylaw, the financial plan bylaw, for adoption per the community charter. So that will happen April through May. We've updated some of the operating expenditure forecasts slightly, as well as the capital expenditure forecast slightly. That's a result of the active transportation incorporation from last night's decision. And in terms of version control, you'll notice that the financial plan version 2 that's posted on the agenda is clearly identified as version 2. And it also identifies any significant changes so that the reader can focus in on those changes rather than having to reread the entire financial plan. So some of the major changes in version 2 are the inclusion of the street light replacement capital program. That budget request was made on time. It was just simply an oversight on my part for inclusion there, as well as updated costing for the Upland Streetlight Replacement Capital Project budget and some special initiative totals as well. And at the last meeting, we had a very keen member of the community who highlighted some misalignment between our debt issuance years, and she was absolutely correct. So those have been changed. The total debt amounts and the debt servicing costs are not have not changed whatsoever, so it doesn't change the effect of the financial plan. But that's been corrected, and that's a good example of positive community involvement. So there's some pending changes between this last version and this one. This last version was prepared in advance of this meeting, so last week the financial plan was compiled. Since then, I put ATP, but I should really spell that out, Active Transportation Plan. We also received local government climate action program grant fund, so that's LGCAP. Again, I apologize for putting the acronym there instead of spelling it out. The province advanced us 3 years worth of payments for that grant. So we'll have to make some small adjustments to it. Council committed those funds to the new senior planner for climate initiative position. So I just have to rework how the financial plan looks. But again, the impact of that is no different. There's some additional fire capital which wasn't carried over, which I'll carry over. It's very minor in the grand scheme of things, but it already had committed and approved funds. And then the COVID-19 balance. The remaining COVID-19 reserve balance has been recalculated. We're right in the middle of our year-end audit, so we've got really crisp numbers there. And that results in no net deficit that needs to be funded through a tax increase this year for the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department. So that reduced the forecasted tax increase slightly for 2024. However, you know, it's just more of a deferral because next year it has to be made up. But we've changed those numbers, and we'll go over that in the tax increase forecast in the slides. As mentioned, the principal issues and short-term risks are identified and documented in the financial plan, and we talked about those in detail at the last meeting, so I won't go over that in detail. But here's the updated tax increase forecast, and we've updated the options for tax increase reductions in the following slides after that. You see the impact of the active transportation plan integration from last night's decision, as well as the COVID-19 restart grant ending in 2024 has been eliminated. So now the tax increase is at 10.41, and there's some options to reduce that should council desire moving forward. Sorry, here we go. Okay, going to skip through our asset management, and there is some resolutions that council will consider coming back to at the end of the meeting or at the pertinent time. The library board will be presenting, and should council wish to approve that budget, there's a resolution for council to adopt there that the 2024 Greater Victoria Public Library budget be approved. Also, if council at the end of this meeting is satisfied with their direction for the financial plan, you can direct staff to prepare the financial plan bylaw. And then the Oak Bay Business Improvement Area Association will be presenting today as well. And if council wishes to approve that budget, the resolution is there for consideration. Other potential resolutions you can consider if council chooses to use non-market change to reduce the tax increase. We've got a resolution there for you to consider. And if council chooses to use the debt servicing funding budget, which has now been eliminated because we're out of debt, that can be used to reduce the tax increase. It would result in the transfer to reserve budget being reduced by $277,000 annually, because that's what it was replaced with. Now, you have to excuse me because I believe I had an options for, here's the options for tax reduction slide that's been updated now. So should council choose to convert the retired debt servicing from a transfer to reserve budget and just eliminate it, the tax increase can be reduced to 9.57% for 2024. That would have the impact of reducing our transfers to reserve over the life of the plan by about $1.25 million. And then if council chose to reduce the tax increase further using non-market change revenue, that would reduce the tax increase to 9.27%. And then council can also choose to reduce the forced growth inflationary factor that's applied to non-specific cost drivers. I know that's a mouthful. I explained that concept last time. I'd be more than happy to explain that concept again. That would reduce the tax increase by $150,000 down to 8.82%. And we've just got some notes there. I know it's a lot of words on the screen, but why they're not necessarily recommended, but they're options for council to consider. So, Your Worship, unless there's any detail on this PowerPoint that the council would like me to go over, that would conclude the opening remark PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. And certainly I would encourage, if there's any members of the public who wish to a bit more detail on some of that, we can circle back at the end as well. But I do appreciate some people don't have all evening to sit. Before I come back, though, and come back to the general budget and get into the capital, we'll move on to the presentations from the Greater Victoria Public Library and then the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association. So without further ado, why don't I welcome forward. We have Ms. Is it Care, and Ms. Sawa from the Greater Victoria Public Library. And I should just acknowledge here as well, we have our Councillor Appleton, has been serving on the library board for a number of years and has been the chair for a year and a half or so now, and is doing an exemplary job representing the municipality on the board. I think I'll just let them introduce. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Murdoch, council members, and staff. Thank you for inviting us to make this presentation. My name is Shahira Khair. I'm Vice Chair of the Greater Victoria Public Library Board and a citizen rep for the City of Victoria. With me to present this evening is our CEO, Maureen Sawa. I would also like to recognize Councillor Andrew Appleton, who is your council representative on the library board and the current board chair. I would also like to acknowledge Mayor Murdoch, who served on the board previously. The commitment of all our councillor trustee members to represent their constituents across GVPL's 10-member municipalities is greatly appreciated. Public libraries provide a place where every citizen belongs. The Greater Victoria Public Library Board is committed to working with our municipal partners so that together we can build communities by providing citizens with equitable access to information, services, and resources to learn and grow. On behalf of the library board, staff, and community that we serve, I would like to express my thanks to the District of Oak Bay Council for your continued support. We are proud of the work we do and appreciate your recognition that libraries do indeed change lives. And now I will turn things over to Maureen for the remainder of the presentation. Maureen and I look forward to responding to any questions you have.
Thank you, Shahira. It's wonderful to be back again. Seems like a minute ago we were here last year. As I always like to do with these presentations, if the thing is going to work. All right, just hang on a sec, excuse me. Okay, all right. Okay, going the wrong way. I always like to remind everyone that, GVPL is a shared service model, including the District of Oak Bay. Your library system serves 10 of the 13 municipalities on the Capital Region District, as illustrated in this map. Our shared service model, funded by our 10 member municipalities, enables residents within each individual municipality to have free and equitable access to a full range of services and resources that only a large urban library system could normally offer. This allows us to provide all of our member municipalities with a standard of service that would not be possible for any one municipality to offer individually. Your place to connect, discover, and imagine, GVPL is truly the definition of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Last year was quite a busy year for us. We've got a few numbers for you, including the number of new cardholders that registered at the Oak Bay branch last year, close to 1,400. We also, in addition to the items that I've noted here, a couple of things that we added in terms of service enhancements last year. We're very proud of the fact that we have free menstrual products available through vending machines, not free machines across the system. So every single branch in the library system, including public and staff washrooms, have these dispensers. Also, the number of plastic water bottles that we saved in a year as a result of the installation of water bottle dispensing stations throughout the system. As always, the Oak Bay branch was one of our top participants in the Summer Reading Club. We had close to 9,000 children participating in 2023. I'm sorry I don't have the exact figure for Oak Bay, but I do know that you were recorded as one of the highest participation rates in the system. And as always, one of the highest completion rates. And those of you who have had involvement with the Summer Reading program know that there's sometimes a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning of the summer, but not everyone completes, so congratulations to Oak Bay. Certainly, we're always happy to remind everyone that public libraries are the community's living room, and that certainly is true in the District of Oak Bay. When we had the closure last year, as you remember, I'm very cognizant of being here a year ago and being asked, when are you going to reopen the branch? When are we going to reopen the branch? And we did reopen in June, but I just want to register our thanks to the staff at the Oak Bay Municipal Hall and also Monterey Center for being so hospitable to us in the Monterey Center. In your presentation, you'll note that there's been a number of references made on the presentation slides to a report published by the Canadian Urban Institute last fall, which was entitled Overdue, the Case for Canada's Public Libraries. In a related article by Globe and Mail reporter Andre Picard, it was noted that, quote, despite dire predictions that bricks and mortar libraries would become obsolete in the digital age, they have become even more important in recent years as essential community hubs. In fact, the headline for his piece was, quote, paying more attention to the health and social benefits of libraries is overdue. And another reference and a review of a new book with the title, Who Needs Libraries Anyway? The Boston Public Library observed that one of the biggest services they provide is simply its space, giving people a place to be for free. So we have some pictures specific to the Oak Bay branch from last year. You'll recognize some familiar faces. It was a memorable year for the Oak Bay branch library. After the reopening of the branch, we had many, many happy faces returning to the branch. I just want to note that the closure did allow us to use the time to make several enhancements to the branch facility, including lighting upgrades, new carpeting and paint, which resulted in a much brighter space than ever before. The energy-efficient lighting attracted the attention of the Right Honourable Ministers Murray Rankin and Nathan Cullen, as you can see in the picture on the top left, who came with our board chair and myself to take a visit and tour. During the days of our temporary pop-up branch in the Monterey Center, where we were able to continue to provide service to Oak Bay residents during the closure, the importance of the branch library to your community was witnessed every single day. Although our services were reduced, the appreciation expressed by those who visited was a testament to the value of the public library in Oak Bay. We're very, very happy that at the beginning of this year, GVPL met the goals of the library board in reducing barriers to access by eliminating overdue fines. Over 50 of the 71 public library systems in British Columbia had already done so, and we greatly benefited from our colleagues' lessons learned and best practices developed, which enabled GVPL to successfully implement this important initiative. The Library Board's 2021-2023 Strategic Bridging Plan, Building a Bridge to a Better Future, came to an end in December 2023. And we're looking ahead now to the next iteration of our strategic planning cycle. We will be adopting the UN Sustainable Development Goals as the primary method to communicate social impacts of GVPL's next strategic plan. And the board and staff are very excited by the work ahead. Libraries serve as critical social infrastructure. Free and inclusive, we provide safe and healthy public spaces, welcoming everyone in the community, acting as formal and informal pathways for learning in a safe, knowledgeable, and caring environment. Libraries contribute to local and provincial economies as employers, consumers, and by providing resources and support for entrepreneurs and job seekers. Basic literacy breaks down many barriers, enabling individuals to proceed to additional education and build their economic mobility. I would just like to quickly provide you with an overview of some of the highlights of the work that we have been focusing on and that we will continue to move forward. So the next few slides are just summaries of various things that we've been doing to meet community needs. We've been hosting a number of cultural events and our partnerships with groups like the BC Settlement and Integration Services and Social Planning Council will continue to support vulnerable populations. From providing free access to tech toys, adaptive technology and services, public computers, Wi-Fi, etc., we will continue to ensure the community can thrive in a digital world. And through our expanded ebook, audio, digital magazine, and newspaper and online databases, library users will continue having access to the content they want and need from anywhere. And now for the budget itself. You have received our budget package. The library board and staff have worked hard to develop a budget for 2024 that is realistic and resourceful. Approximately 90% of the GVPL operating budget is funded by our 10 municipal partners. Consequently, the key objective is to balance and maintain municipal contribution increases against service delivery, rates of inflation, and projected wage increases as negotiated through GVLRA. Because needs and opportunities change over time as we strive to best serve our communities, GVPL's budget process allows reasonable flexibility for business areas to adapt and optimize their activities as events unfold, while still requiring system-wide financial planning and accountability. For 2024, increased pressure on staffing levels and service delivery has impacted the operating budget. This, in addition to inflationary pressures, has resulted in an upward trend on expenses overall. Operational efficiencies through cost avoidance strategies will continue to be explored as with prior years. However, the true costs of many inputs to deliver service are increasing. Lastly, as with other years, the use of reserves has been approved by the board to augment some unavoidable budget increases. We are committed to operating efficiently and effectively to deliver library services to our 10-member municipalities. We are pleased and proud that the library system leverages more than 100 active community partnerships to expand programs and lifelong learning opportunities for Greater Victoria residents. So I jumped a slide here. Okay, so we are requesting an overall municipal contribution increase of 5.99%. The board has worked very hard with staff to keep the increase as minimal as possible. As I mentioned, pressures to expand our services and reach continue to grow, and expectations from the public are driven further by their own pressures experienced by inflation and also significant media coverage of innovative public library projects across the country and abroad. I would like to thank the members of the library's finance committee for their scrutiny and their work in ensuring that the budget is as lean as possible. We feel that this budget supports equitable access to services and programs that make a difference to the lives of residents by engaging them in a love of reading and lifelong learning, addressing the digital divide and fostering collaboration, creativity, and innovation. So the 2024 requisition for the District of Oak Bay, based on converted assessment values and population, and including rental adjustments, is $2,282,563. This is a contribution increase of 4.50% over last year, which results in a cost per capita increase of $2.87. Finally, I'm jumping ahead, sorry. When Andrew Carnegie built the first public libraries in North America, they were referred to as palaces for the people. Libraries bring people together. We are not the only third place in the community, but we are the one place where people of all ages and stages are welcome to stay and explore as long as they want, spending time, not money. Making life more affordable is a key priority for the district and the province, and public libraries fill an essential role in providing individuals with equitable access to the resources they need to thrive and strengthen the entire community. Finally, just want to say that when you come to the library, you have not only freedom, but freedom to belong and discover. And in ending, I just would like to say Vice Chair Carr and I would be pleased to respond to any questions, and we thank you for your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Sawa. Are there questions? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson and Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. Really is a gathering spot in the community, I think. But the statistics certainly back that up too. Now, but I do know that particularly as we're facing tough economic challenges, for people particularly who are on fixed incomes, a lot of the retirement community, and certainly a lot of the residents who also go to the Monterey Center. So it's like the library stop and the Monterey stop.
Yeah.
It's you know, after breakfast and then on to lunch at Monterey Center. But the use of the computers, particularly in the library, is something I get feedback on. I guess there is, the statistics weren't there on the computers, but I get a lot of comments about, oh, I would, wish they had more. But so obviously, having the available use of the computers and connection to the internet probably does save a considerable amount of money for seniors on fixed incomes. Just wondering if you could comment on the use of the computers or what we're looking forward to in that area.
Sure. Thank you for that question. We are in the process of adding more computer stations to branches. I know Oak Bay was one that was identified as needing more. So I'm glad to get that feedback because it is a very well used and popular service. And I know during the closure last year that was a real hardship for people, and we were so glad to be able to reopen the space and provide it. So we are looking at expanding. It's funny because initially after we reopened during COVID, there was some thought that maybe the public computers weren't going to be as well used, and I think it was because initially there was still some reluctance to kind of utilize a piece of equipment in a public space, but that's kind of dissipated, and we are seeing an increased use. So I will share that feedback, and thank you very much. Thanks.
Anything else?
Yes, if just one more question. I do note that Oak Bay has although not the highest per capita increase, it does have the highest per capita cost, the library. Certainly after looking at the use of it, I think it's really good value for the per capita cost of the library. We certainly get our use out of the library here in Oak Bay. Could you just perhaps explain how that formula is arrived at, just
Yes.
out of curiosity?
Yeah, no, I always know that that's going to be a question,
Always a question.
and I just always want to make sure that I don't confuse things. Okay, so the formula is that each municipality will pay a share. I'll just kind of read this context for you, of the net operating costs of the board. So basically, it's 50% of the converted assessment value for the municipality divided by the total converted assessment values of all municipalities, and 50% of the population of the municipality divided by the total population of the municipalities. So, and I just want to note that tax assessment values and population values are expressed as a percentage of the total value of each. This includes both residential and commercial, so business and federal crown land, and are obtained from the BC Assessment Bureau based on the revised roll totals, which are typically available in late spring of each year after final assessments are completed. I think it's important to note that it is based on demographics and tax assessment as it's related to the rest of the year. And I think it's important, and I know we say this every year, even if our budget was a 0% increase, how the pie is divided can change year over year based on shifting tax assessment values and population in the regions. based on how the regional growth influences the formula. So it's interesting because historically, as you may recall from a few years ago, we have seen that it was focused a lot in Oak Bay and Saanich. We're now seeing a shift in terms of tax assessment values going out to the West Shore. And that is representative when you look at the breakdown of the increases overall. You will see that some of the higher ones now are showing up in the West Shore. So just based on population and tax assessment in those areas because of the growth. Yeah, so it does change according to the way the community changes, but I think it's if you look overall, actually per capita, Oak Bay this year's got one of the lowest increases. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Sawa. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. Actually, that was one of my questions. My other question is, and I believe I know the answer for this, is that I have been asked to ask if the fact that not having late dues has had an impact on the books being returned and therefore the loss and replacement costs of books.
Ms. Sawa?
As I mentioned, we benefited from the lessons learned and the experiences from the many other libraries that kind of introduced this as long ago as 3-4 years ago. This started happening across Canada and the United States. We have not. Now it's still early days. I mean, we just started doing this in January, so we're going to be doing the kind of the assessment, but anecdotally from other library systems, no, that they're in fact, and the usage is going up. So certainly, I think it's also important just to recognize that we may have eliminated overdue fines. We have not eliminated fees for unreturned materials. Okay, so there is, you won't get fined when you bring your late material back, but you will be charged if you don't bring it back after a certain period of time. Yeah.
Thank you. That actually really helps because I think that's the part that was missing is that people don't understand that piece. So that's really helpful. And I would assume that if in the future, if the assessment, when you do your assessment of not collecting the late fees, if you find that that does have an effect, then you would rethink on what you would want to do.
Yeah, and we just so you know that the last figure in terms of revenue, it's like 1.2% of our overall revenue was overdue fines. So it really was kind of a non-issue in terms of the budget. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Green, go ahead.
Thank you, through you. Good to see you. Thank you very much for the presentation and the report. Just wanted to ask you if you would comment on your relationship with school libraries. Is there a working relationship between school libraries and the GVPL? And I don't know that, so
Yeah.
I'm just interested to know what that relationship looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Our literacy our librarians do have active relationships, especially when we're promoting our summer reading program. So there's not a formal agreement per se, but there's a lot of liaising and professional development activities. They kind of ceased before COVID, but we are doing more with the schools. So I can certainly provide a little bit more information with the specifics, but we have our literacy pillar, like we have our librarians based into kind of emerging literacy, middle years literacy, and it's very much focused on supporting literacy learning in the schools. Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more question. I'm going to ask questions and responses to be reasonably short. We have a lot of stuff to get through today.
Okay.
And go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Just a quick question about the provincial funding. Of course, has been stagnant here for quite some period of time. Is that the same throughout Canada, or is that a BC provincial issue?
Okay. It has been static for over 10 years from the province here in British Columbia. I can't speak with any authority for the other provinces in Canada. Everyone is different. I know some in the models, the provincial funding model is different for each province. I know that Advocacy continues to happen, and I know Councillor Appleton has been quite engaged with working with our partner, Vancouver Island Regional Library System, to with the upcoming AVIC convention. There is a motion going forward. So we are doing our best, the whole library community, to encourage the province to reconsider the funding base. As you know, we did receive a one-time enhancement grant last year from the province that kind of would cover over the next 3 years. And the hope is that that's going to demonstrate to them what can be done with more funding on a sustainable basis. I don't know if Councillor Appleton wants to add to that, or...
Councillor Appleton?
I would just add, Your Worship, that as per Ms. Sawa's comments, I appreciate Council's support of the motion to AVIC. It's very important that all municipal representatives and all folks who are attending those conferences going to UBCM raise that issue of continued sustainable funding. We're not talking about a great deal of funding here, and what library systems can do with a comparatively small amount is very impactful. So I appreciate Council's support for that AVIC resolution, and I will keep Council posted.
Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the presenters. I just wanted to ask about extended hours in the evening. I know that we have a lot of community residents that reach out and want public facilities that are open in the evening to allow those that don't necessarily have like a safe place or a quiet place at home. And I know that it's very likely a budget issue, which is why I ask it now. I just wondered if there's any plans or discussion to open the community living room later at night.
It's certainly something that we would like to see happen. Right now, we're focusing on ensuring that we can maintain the Sunday hours. Oak Bay is one of the branches that we were able to expand our Sunday opening hours for. So that was noted as kind of priority. So we're still working on that for the system. It is a staffing issue. It's not so much budget, it's a staffing and recruitment issue and scheduling. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you. I don't see other hands. Mr. Payne, is it appropriate to take the motion at this point for the library?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll put it on the screen for council consideration.
Thank you. Go hand this over to Councillor Appleton, who I think would probably like to make the motion, and then can speak to it as well.
Rip.
Seconded. Mrs. Sawa, can I just get you to turn off the microphone in front of you? We have a limited number that can be on at one time. Thank you. Why don't you speak now, Councillor Appleton?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll be brief. Obviously, I have a great deal of knowledge and involvement in the budget of the GVPL as chair of the board. I can assure you that this is a extremely high-functioning board, putting a very, very strong degree of oversight into the budget. And this is an organization that runs with significant efficiency and with thought put to all aspects of the operation. So even though I do have a certain lean because I'm the chair of the board, in terms of value for money and delivery of important services for the community, this is excellent value in my view.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands poking up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Did you wish to say a few words before we let the library representatives depart, Councillor Appleton?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. First of all, to Vice Chair Kerr, that's supposed to be my seat sitting over there. She is sitting in for me in my stead. Vice Chair Kerr actually did more budget presentations this year than I did as chair, so I want to say thank you in this venue, just because of the way things worked out. Council has often, before we let our guests leave, I'm going to take an advantage here just really quickly. Council has often heard me refer to the high-functioning staff at the GVPL, and everybody from the branch level all the way up are extreme professionals in what they do, and it's a pleasure and an honor to serve as chair of the board. Everybody is a real specialist in what they do. I want to take this opportunity in this forum because the next time that we have one of these budget presentations, I may not be the chair. In fact, I won't be. And I want to specifically recognize CAO Maureen Sawa for her work. We have an exceptional library system full of professionals. We have a nationally recognized system, and Ms. Sawa is one of the best in the country at what she does. And she sets an extremely strong standard for her entire staff team. She's gone out and presented to 8 out of the 10 member municipalities over the last couple of months. And she works extremely hard on behalf of her team. So I wanted to take this opportunity in this public sphere for the public and for the benefit of council to recognize her specifically for her leadership of this organization. The region is extremely fortunate to have her leading this organization, and I want to thank her specifically. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I'm going to cry.
Thank you, Ms. Sawa and Ms. Kane. I really appreciate the time that you've taken here tonight with us. We've got you out of here at a reasonable hour, so have a great evening.
We thank you very much, and I would just like to give it right back to our board chair. Great chair. And our vice chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We move next to the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association. I believe we have the president and Ms. Leary here.
To work with.
Welcome, and I'll let you just provide an overview.
Good evening. My name is Martin Cowden. I am the president of the Oak Bay Village Business Improvement Association, and this is Heather Leary. I'm sure everyone knows her, and she is our events coordinator and just about everything else that happens for the BIA. She's the wheels. She makes it happen. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to come to you tonight and make representation and present a budget. I'd like to start by first saying our gratitude to council, for staff, for administration, public works, and all those that make this possible, including terrific support from Councillor Braithwaite and Appleton as our representatives from council, and also Corinne's Councillor Green is always got our back and supporting. So we feel your support, all of you, and we just want to say thank you. We feel it's really part of the community here. You would have received our letter and to Mayor and Council. Please find attached the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association budget for 2024. The attached document includes a timeline for our initiatives as well as the outline for estimated costs going ahead. We are planning at this point a full schedule of annual events. The Oak Bay Village Spring Nosh, Music in the Village, Oak Bay Village Night Market, Trick or Treats on the Avenue, Halloween, Oak Bay Light Up and Parade of Lighted Trucks celebrations. So we're planning the full event this year. We hear continuously how important these initiatives are, and not only to our businesses who benefit from this, but also the community at large, providing a family-friendly space for people to gather and connect with their community. They're great events. As with other groups, we're experiencing inflationary pressures. None of us would have anticipated the inflationary impact 5 years ago when we appealed to you for an increase in our budget. The inflationary impact that's happened, particularly in the last 2 years, has been substantial. So it will have an impact on our operations this year. We're continuing to work with cost-effective work to cost-effectively produce high-caliber events, as well as support other initiatives that will foster a vibrant village community. We designed these initiatives to support business as well as our broader community. So it's not just about the Oak Bay Village businesses, it's about drawing people from our community, near and far, into the village to help make it the vibrant place that it is. Well, we usually have to tightly manage our finances. In the last year of our mandate, and that is this year is especially tight due to economic climate that we are facing. We appreciate the ongoing support of council in our efforts to present the Oak Bay Village as a dynamic, welcoming, vibrant place. Based on our anticipated costs, we have presented a budget that exceeds our annual allocation. But we think this accurately reflects the costs of our initiatives. We'll be working on ways to secure grants and sponsorships to make up the shortfall, as we cannot operate with a deficit, so we're not permitted to. If we're unable to secure additional funds, we will scale down or cut events this year with the hope to bring them back in 2025, or go out with our hands out to see if we can get support wherever we can. It's additionally difficult to go back to our supporting businesses and ask them for more money because they're feeling all the same pinch impact that we are. We all feel, so it's a balancing act to do what we can, to continue doing what we can, without burdening businesses to contribute more. And I think everyone understands that it's the businesses that actually contribute to the fund that funds this. And while it's often referred to as a grant, it's really giving back the money that the municipality so wonderfully collected. So that's our introduction. Thank you. As far as our budget goes, I don't know how much detail you would like to go into it. I think at the bottom line, I have this tendency to look at budgets and I turn to the last page and say, what does it say? Well, you know, our budget of $100,000 is not going to get us through the year, and we need to find ourselves ways, with the help of council, with the help of business, with the help of grants, and any other way that we can to make this happen. In past years, when we came, and the last time we came, we had significant grant sponsorships from businesses, and those all feel the same pinch that we do. And so we don't have that amount of surplus coming in. We had, as I recall, budgets of about $100,000 or less, and we had total revenues exceeding about $125,000 because of the great work of Heather, realistically, and getting sponsorships and people to contribute. So that's where we're at right now, and if there's any questions, if you want any further detail, we could go on all night, but after last night, I'm not sure we want to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cowden. As you know, this is a pass-through. We collect the fees from the businesses on your behalf and pass them back in accordance with your plan. So the ask of us is fairly straightforward in terms of approving the budget, but there is a chance that people do have questions. You may ask them at this time. Councillor Braith.
Mandate is coming up next year, and this, unlike the municipality, who when they're doing a 5-year budget, we can change that every year and we can add money in. You guys can't. So when you did your 5-year budget, it was $100,000 for the 5 years, and that was 5 years ago. And as you've explained, the inflation had an effect on that. What is your feeling that you might be able to? Is there a limit that you can go to the businesses and ask for? Or is that just something that you will form your budget and then you'll go to the businesses and say, this is exactly what we want? So let's say, for example, it was $125,000 that you wanted to ask for each year. Is that just something that you would go to the businesses and ask, or the municipality would go to the businesses and ask for that on your behalf?
Mr. Cowden?
Sorry, do you mean with the mandate renewal with increased budget going forward after this year? So we would set a new budget target for the 5 years. So traditionally, we've divided the budget up evenly between the 5 years. So if it's 500,000 over 5 years, we get 100,000. So we would look at what a feasible increase will be, and then when we apply for the mandate, I believe that's when we go into the renewal and get approval to go forward with that. And then what happens, as you know, is that the property owners will vote to accept or deny based on that information and what value we bring to the table.
Added to that, when it comes to the property owners, they have their own challenges as well. If they come and ask for an increase, for example, they're going to pass those increases on to the tenants, and then they have to rent out that space to tenants who may or may not be able to support the increase. And so it's a double-edged sword. We bring a great deal of value, bring thousands of people to the village, and thousands of people on a singular event. And we believe that that brings a great deal of community together and value. And I'm confident the landlords, the owners of the properties, feel the same way. But to the extent that they wish to add to the costs and the expenses of what they have to, there's the question. And everybody's feeling the same pinch. So we're looking for ways to gain a little more support going forward. And I think I have to emphasize that no one 5 years ago saw interest rates what they are, inflation what they are, costs of everything what they are. So we're now in the 5th year of that, and that's where we're at. I don't know that we're allowed to put an inflation rider in the future, but there we go.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Braithwaite? I'll accept the motion, always welcome.
I'll move that the 2024 Oak Bay Business Improvement Area budget be approved.
Moved and seconded. With the motion, both comments and questions are welcome. No. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank the two of you for doing such a great job of everything within our municipality, all the events. You know, we who sit around this table often get the credit for the events that get put on in the village. We really have nothing to do with it. It's really the two of you who are sitting at that table, and especially Ms. Leary, but with the support of Mr. Cowden. And I think that you are serving our community very, very well. The number of people who come into our community, as you've mentioned, Mr. Cowden, for some of these events does nothing but augment our building, our businesses. They come in, they shop here, they eat here, and they play here, and it's wonderful. I will say that it makes such a vibrant village that we have, and we are the envy of many other municipalities, and so thank you for that. I also would like to say that Councillor Green and I have been working very hard on getting the Oak Bay Tourism and the Oak Bay BIA together, and to that end, Mr. Cowden is now sitting on as a director on the Oak Bay Tourism Committee as the liaison for Oak Bay BIA, and the hope is that they can work together because the Oak Bay Tourism has a much larger budget than Oak Bay BIA does. So we're hoping that they can work together and do a little bit of help in that respect. So thank you for that, Mr. Cowden. I know it's a pull on your time as a business owner, and I do appreciate the time that you put in. So thank you very much to you both. We're very fortunate to have you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I'm going to go to Councillor Green, but I do want to acknowledge as well. So Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Green act as a liaison and an alternate liaison, but they're both very actively engaged with the BIA as well as the tourism, and really do appreciate the work that you guys put into that. This work. So.
Actually, Councillor
Appleton is the back.
Of course he is.
Corinne's always been our backup. Just
sorry, Councillor Green.
sorry,
It's for the tourism. Councillor Appleton is the alternate. But I do appreciate all the work that gets put into these connections. I'm having the leftovers from last night here. I think my brain is not quite working. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
You should have brought a sleeping bag too. I just wanted also through you, thank you very much, and echo Councillor Braithwaite's words. You do so much, and your reach is far greater than the village. I hope you know that. It's across the region, and you bring thousands of people here for the large events like the market and so on. And so it's not just within the village, it's outside the village, which is why the connection with tourism is so fortunate because I think you really complement each other, and we look forward to a really strong working relationship there. So thanks so much.
Councillor Green, Councillor Appleton?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And through you to our guests, I actually have a small question. Just with respect to market, market stalls and essentially the engagement rate. And so how has that tracked over the last couple of years, and how, it takes a lot of work to get the stalls filled and to fill them at the, there's a rate for filling them and that sort of thing. I'm just curious, how is that tracking, and are you sort of liking what the numbers are looking like? Is there something, what steps have you taken to kind of ensure that, this is it's fall, there's not big empty spots or anything like that, but what are some of the challenges around sort of getting that full, keeping it full, and sort of keeping competitive rates with other similar places where vendors would want to display?
Ms. Leary?
So do you mean engagement with vendors or engagement with the public?
I would say the challenge of vendors, ensuring that you've got a good diversity and basically a full market, essentially.
So I put the call out, so vendors who've been previously vendors the last year get to renew first. And so we opened it up to new vendors on the 1st of March, and I am about 85% sold out. So I'm down to 12 or so spaces left. So we track very specifically in each category. So you don't have 30 jewelry vendors, you don't have 40 food trucks, because we could. And so we look at having a nice vendor mix that complements also who's here on the avenue as a storefront as well. And so in terms of that, as a market that happens only 4 times a year, we're less of a market and more of a special event that has vendors. Because when you have a place like Moss Street, it's part convenience and it's part support local, because you can go every Saturday and you can shop there. But if you miss a market in Oak Bay, you have to wait a whole month to come back, which drives a lot of enthusiasm, and it attracts vendors who can't sustain a weekly schedule. So we get a much different vendor mix than you see at the weekly markets. And so those things combined, we see a lot of demand. Like I have a wait list for jewelry, I have a wait list for food trucks already. So in terms of the vendor recruitment, we're not seeing a lot of issue with that. They just wish we had 2 hours for setup, which we won't ever be able to do, unfortunately. So
Thank you for that.
Could I add just to that, I go around and talk to the vendors as well. Heather does the real business. I just stroll around and talk to them. And they almost without exception say that this is the best market they go to. And they go to many markets. I was in Sydney Market past summer and talked to vendors that I recognized, and they just say, it's great, but not as good as here. So that's to do with the market. And there's something, one other thing you were offering great accolades about what we do, but I just like to say for myself, I grew up in this community. I played on the streets here. You talked about traffic last night. I was one of those kids that were riding bicycles all over the place where I shouldn't have. But I just feel it's a sense of privilege to be able to give back to the community that has been giving to the citizens here so richly for so many years. We don't decide where, as children, where we get born, where we're brought up, the schools we attend to, the fire services, the police services. They were most kind and generous, the police, when I was a kid, and I remain grateful for that.
Careful, the police are right behind you. The statute of limitations may not have run out on whatever you did as a child, so.
I just remember Sergeant Morgan saying, you either come here, I'm phoning your mother. Which would you like to do, your mother or the police station? I said, I'll go to the police station. But so I just feel it's a sense of privilege to have grown up here, enjoyed the amenities that go on, and we have this opportunity to give back. It's wonderful. Thank you all for what you do as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cowden. I don't see any other comments or questions.
Can I just add one comment? Very, very short comment. Yes. And I just wanted to say my thanks as the boots on the ground to council and to staff for the can-do attitude that you present when we bring initiatives forward. Not every municipality has the same kind of attitude. I've worked in all of them, and it's a very special thing that we have here where you can work together to achieve something. And maybe we don't do everything in the first year, but we get there with them, and that's a direct reflection of the leadership and the staff in this room. So I just wanted to say my thanks, because it makes a difference for me every day when I'm out there getting things done.
Thank you. No, seeing any hands for questions or comments, I'll call it.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Sorry, excuse me, I'm getting to this rather late, but I do have a question. I'm interested in this, Ms. Larry. Just about market revenue, and you were talking about attracting vendors and a really successful sell-up period. Do you differentiate between class of vendors when you set your price for them?
Renewing vendors get a small price break of $20 if they pay before the 1st of March. So it goes from 180 to 200 after the March. So new vendors pay slightly more. They take more time to process and organize, so they pay slightly more. We'll be reviewing the fee structure next year. Well, we look at it every year, but we'll be looking at, our rates are competitive with other markets, but probably I've been asked to look at increasing them, so not
And
by
just to,
vendors.
thank you, just to follow up, so there's no differentiation between the jeweler versus the produce vendor versus
Correct,
the whatever? Okay,
yes.
thank
Other
you.
markets sometimes will charge food vendors more, and that may be something we could look at, but we don't have enough that would make a difference in our budget. It just would be more of an equalizer. So,
Very good. I'm going to call the question. Motion is to approve the budget as laid out for us. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cowan, Ms. Leary.
When's the spring nosh?
Sure, good question. What is the date of the first event of the season, the Spring Nosh?
June 15th, we're looking to hold all of the aspects we had before and even more, so stay tuned.
Very good. Those are interested in interesting food event. That's a great one to go to at the west end of the avenue. Okay, moving on to
I call it Upper Avenue.
Upper Avenue. We move on to the capital budget. We have capital budgets for all the different departments. I do want to, just out of respect, it's 8 o'clock, and I'll do this call a couple of times through the evening. But if there's any members of the public who have questions or even comments, we'd be happy to take them at this time. If you wish to stick and listen to some of the discussion first, you're more than welcome to do that too. So please come forward. Welcome. And it just procedurally, this is for you and for everybody who might want to speak both online and here. If you're online and wish to speak, you can use the tool to raise your hand, or if you're dialing into the 855 number, you can call or hit *9. But basically, just state your name, municipality of residence, and we asked you to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. And on topic, of course. And you have to turn the mic on in front of you. And other than that, we're a friendly place. I know it's sometimes a bit nerve-wracking to sit there and talk, but welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. My name's Carl Fisher. I live at 2155 Coven Drive here in Oak Bay, and I have for many, many years. I have a few comments for your consideration. First of all, I'd like to really express my appreciation for your going the extra step of engaging the public in the development of a financial plan. I think particularly nowadays when we're dealing with inflation, the potential for recession, market collapse, housing market calamity, and every other financial disaster that we could be staring down the barrel of, it's going to be very important to engage all the stakeholders, including the public. And I recognize that's a difficult thing for municipalities to do. Whatever you can do to actively reach out and engage the public to get involved and to consider the impact of taxation questions, I think is very important. You know, throughout your materials, your presentation materials, I was very pleased to see that there was an eye towards sustainability. I think that's very important. It wasn't that long ago that municipal governments, particularly in the United States, were in crisis and going bankrupt. So it's very important to take a sustainability outlook. You do make use of reserve funds, which can be very useful to kind of bridge our current accounting practice to the more traditional restricted fund basis of accounting. The one thing I haven't been able to find, and I haven't had a chance to look at your financial statement notes, is the policy or principles underlining the governance of reserve funds. And I think that's very important because reserve funds operate on a different temporal range than municipal decisions. So I think for everyone's best interests, having sound policies outlining the governance and accountability of what are becoming quite material funds now is going to be very important going forward. The second item that I want to talk about is in the presentation, there's an anticipation of increases in the future averaging 8.84%. Everything's getting more expensive, right? And we do have a desire to continue living in the best place in the world. But at that rate, property taxes for households will double every 7 years, about. When I look back to my case over the past 20 years, that rate of growth has been consistent. The part of sustainability that I didn't see any consideration or mention of in the financial plan was the sustainability related to the affordability of households. 8.84% is significantly more than inflation, our expectations of inflation, and significantly more than the expected growth of household income. So if we were not thoughtful about what that threshold will be in the future, the council of that time will have to kind of anticipate what kind of emergency steps should be taken to deal with that lack of constituent interest in continued tax increases. So you have an opportunity to do that now, and it seems like a little bit of bad news or maybe a downer suggestion to start thinking about, well, what do we do in a crisis situation? What if we have to pull back? What if all of the doom and gloom of our economic future that will impact even people living in Oak Bay, bubble as it might be, if you do that now, you might be better off in the future, or set the stage for future councils and mayors to have the expectation of moving forward in a less shock-driven way. So those are the comments that I made. Again, certainly thank you very much for the public engagement. I know it's hard. I've recently retired, so I'm keen and excited to share all of my comments with you. But it's hard to get the public involved, and without that public involvement, we're really, at a loss as to find the best way forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. I will just point out, just for yourself and other people, if you're curious about, they are sometimes hard to find online. In our financial plan, on page one, starting on page 113, there's a summary of all of the reserve funds with some descriptions. Some are established by bylaws, so if you Google the bylaw name, you'll find it. If some of them are established by policy, and the policies are referred to in there as well. I don't know, Mr. Payne, if there's a more central place you can go to and just see all of our reserve policies in one place.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have a bylaws repository on our website. There you'll find the reserve fund bylaw as well as the reserve policy. The reserve policy is a good consolidated version because it does mention also the bylaws that have, also the reserves that happen to be in the bylaw and a description there. So that's a good resource, and I take Mr. Fisher's points well. We do in the financial plan mention that we have a policy, but those policy items aren't specifically identified in the financial plan. Thank you.
Like I said, starting on page 113, there is a list of the reserves with some description, but doesn't include the actual policy. The other thing I'll just point out, and I take your point very well, I'm just going to respond to it. Your comments about the long-term sustainability are absolutely 100% correct, and I think one of the sort of decisions that this council's made over the last 5 years has been recognizing that we were starting to get to the point where 33% or more than a third of our time of public works was spent doing break fix work on 100-year-old pipes, and we need to get in front of that and start replacing these things more aggressively. So if you saw that graph that we've been funding, we're kind of in the painful part of that curve where we're needing to ramp up the funding. We're almost at 100% of that long-term funding. At that point, you start bringing down the operational costs and freeing up some of those monies to relieve some of that pressure. At least that's the theory, and we're sort of being principally led by our engineering and public and engineering and finance department on that. It's the model. It's the only way we see it being financially sustainable in the long run. So I'll just leave that there, and we'll get back to the business. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward? Yeah, please come forward. Same process. You state your name, and I don't just need to put you on the microphone first. Name, municipality of residence, and I'll try and I'll let you know if you're creeping over the 3-minute mark. And again, you can come up later to speak on other things. So can you push the button on the microphone in front of you?
There, how's that? Good. Okay. Yeah. I'm reading the paper this morning. Sydney's taxes going up 6.5%. Oh, wow. And then I read Oak Bay residents face 9.68%. And so it spurred me to come to the meeting. And I'm Mr. Fisher, I guess, and Martin before me sort of introduced the subject. So I was interested maybe it's the sewer projects there's in your one-off items, there's only $70,000 there for the sewer, so it's not the sewer. And I guess half of it, the 4.5 million or whatever it is, about of one-off items this year is to do with the housing initiative initiated by the province, and you have simply to respond, and I appreciate that. What are the other one-off items? And this is a shock to have that sort of increase, especially when you're retired and you're on a set income. And I know I'm sure you've had to face hard decisions in coming up with the budget, but maybe there should be a couple more hard decisions. And for example, in the one-offs, one of them is there's about $430,000 to negotiate or initiate or whatever the Indigenous people's participation in the Oak Bay Marina. Now, does that one-off have to happen this year? Could a hard decision be made that is deferred? I don't know. I'm simply putting it to you that the residents, a lot of the people will be quite shocked upset with the increase that you're proposing. And I think that hopefully there's some room to do some deferrals, do some more pencil sharpening. I'll leave it with you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we are very acutely aware of we're all taxpayers as well, so we all feel this pain as well as things go up. I would encourage anybody who's interested, the financial plan does lay out a lot of the specifics, but the presentation that we kind of glossed through because we went through it last week, if you want to see the presentation of that, you can go back and watch that as well. Like lays out a bit more detail, some of the pressures. Many of the one-time costs are not actually reflected in the percentage increase. They're often paid out of reserves and things. So most of the costs that we try and put into the tax are costs like the permanent additional inputs that we're putting into our asset replacement reserves and things of that nature as we've been underfunding and are trying to get those numbers back up again. But I'm not going to get into all the details of the budget here right now. We're going to go through the capital pieces. Yeah, please come forward.
Maggie Knight, Oak Bay. I just wanted to appreciate the difficulty that council sits with as you're grappling with what to do about where to get the money that you need to make up for a lack of saving and upkeep of infrastructure in the past. And I would just ask that I'm sure you're doing this, but I appreciate the challenge of weighing kind of that one-off, can we defer a bit, can we make this year less painful, with kind of continuing what seems to have been a pattern of kicking the can down the road. And to keep that long view as well. We're looking at a significant amount of debt that'll be putting us into, $2.5+ million a year in interest payments alone. And my perception, and I'd be happy to understand if I am inaccurate in this understanding, is that a significant amount of that is because for many years, Oak Bay taxes went up by 3%, 3%, 3% or less. And so that is really hard for the people who are here now. Some of the people who are here now are people who also benefited from that 3%, 3%, 3%. Some of us are newer to the homeowner situation, but I wanted to appreciate the difficulty and also to say I don't think we get out of this by continuing to kick the can down the road, and we would rather know where we are and not have even bigger foul ups later on as our infrastructure breaks and emergency costs are usually higher and harder. So thank you for your work, and yeah, please take that long-term view as well.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Anybody else? And again, there will be opportunities later if people wish to come up later. I see nobody online, nobody here. So why don't we start on our capital things, and I'll take a break in a bit if there's any additional public input. Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to share my screen. Mentioned the departmental capital plans, and we'll begin on its page. Oh, I've gone too far. My apologies. Oh, there we go. Other direction. The corporate administration capital budget, which begins on page 124 of the financial plan, happens to be page 128 of the agenda. Your Worship, the district has made significant strides in populating its long-term capital plan over the last 5 or 6 years, and that's reflected in this year's capital plan quite significantly. My intention in terms of presenting the capital budget is mostly going to be on an exception basis, which means that had the project been approved to the same amount in previous financial plans, I won't specifically discuss it unless council wishes to discuss that. That will provide some expediency, but council should feel free at any point to ask any questions about any of the projects that are listed in the financial plan. So a good example of this is the corporate administration capital plan, which has no changes from last year's capital plan. So in that regard, I don't intend on discussing the projects that are listed there. And if council is comfortable with that process, then we'll kickstart that right now, and I'll move to the financial capital plan. Does that work, Your Worship?
I'll just see if there's any questions, but I tend to agree that there's not much point. We're at the end point of that capital project sort of model. It doesn't make a lot of sense to spend time on it. So looking around, don't see any questions, so please continue.
Thank you, Your Worship. And where you'll see the most change will be in the Engineering and Public Works Department, as well as the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department, because those are the most exhaustive, large capital plans, and they've put a tremendous amount of work into their capital programming over the last 4 or 5 years. They've also grown in capacity to deliver those capital projects. So we'll save in all of that for the end of the presentation. Moving on to the Finance and IT Capital Plan, which can be found on page 129 of the agenda, or 125 of the financial plan. Only one change is noted, and that's the new PCs for new employees. We do have that budget often show up, but the amount changes depending on how much staffing grows through the previous year. In this case, there was some office space at Public Works, the second floor at Public Works Hall, which was repurposed for office space, and Wi-Fi was provided and as well. So the intention with this new budget is to provide computer equipment for rotational use by Public Works staff. So that would be new and an expanded sort of capability for their staff. There is plans underway to scope and implement work order management software, as well as utilize calls for service for as-built and other things which would make the processes underway at Public Works more efficient. So it would be an expansion of the technology, but a more efficient use of Public Works labor and delivering of their services where there. So we do have a $25,000 request for that, which is integrated into the Finance and Information Technology Capital Plan. But if there's any questions about that, the Director of Engineering would be happy to answer as well.
Mr. Payne, I just want to point out to anybody, if you, just out of curiosity, before you leave, sir, if I might, there are hard copies of the financial plan. If you wanted to take one with you or have a look at it, you're more than welcome to do so. Yeah, I think we can provide that for you if it's an easier piece than going through the electronic version. We do provide them for the public's use. So, and I was going to say that for anybody else from the public who wishes to have one in the room here, I think we can probably get you a copy. No, okay. Sometimes it's hard to find, follow along on these screens, so I wanted to make sure you knew that we had those available. Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. That concluded that. Are there any questions of Mr. Payne for the Finance Department IT? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you, and through you. Thank you, Mr. Payne. And just a question on the website upgrade while I'm looking at it. Is it possible to get an update on the progress in that regard? Because as you note in your report, it is one of the key communication tools that we have with the community. And, you know, we always get feedback about the website, but I just wondered if you had an update for us, if that would be all right. Thank you.
Is that to Mr. Payne or to admin staff? Nope. Is it? Ms. Plouffe, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So the website project, we have selected a contractor, and we have had one kickoff meeting, and they're underway right now, basically in the first phases. But the new website, the project is underway.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sorry I got the wrong individual. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? I always appreciate everybody reading this stuff ahead of time, so we have minimized the questions here. We'll move on then to facilities.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And in that vein, there is no change to the dollar values or the projects in the facilities program. One change in the format presented would be the facilities feasibility studies, which have been summarized in previous versions of the financial plan. The specific facilities that were going to be subject to feasibility studies were separated out. The feasibility studies are driven from the facilities master plan, so that would include Public Works, Todd House, the rec centers. And in reality, those feasibility studies are not prioritized for completion in the facilities operations at the moment, as the Carnarvon Park Master Plan and the Public Safety Building are the top priorities and major projects. So it would be fair to term those as placeholder budgets that are there for intention as driven by the Facilities Master Plan. So thank you, Your Worship. That's the Facilities Capital Plan presentation. And I do note Mr. Graham is in the room if anybody has any questions about the facilities program. Also, there was one note made at the last meeting, and the note is integrated in the financial plan. There's a general capital facilities program here for $400,000 per year that was established, I believe, last year, if not the year before. That program is being used for general maintenance around the district, including the contracting of general maintenance staff as well. The district is currently looking at an option to use that fund to hire a permanent staff member, which would take over that role rather than having it contracted out. So there's no increase to the funding being requested, but just the utilization of that as well. And that is noted in the financial plan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. Go ahead, have questions. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson and Smart.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Payne. Could you just remind me, are you using an inflationary escalator in developing this on the facilities capital plan? Because it's stable every year.
Could you just speak a little louder into the microphone? I don't think it was that very audible.
Yes, my question was, because it is stabilized across one of the questions I've had, and so I will put it to you, is are you using an inflation escalator in the future years, and if so, what the amount is?
Mr. Payne?
Through your worship, much like many of our program funding, which is an envelope funding for a certain asset class, the person in charge or that has that budget goes and programs that into specific projects. And certainly in preparing those estimates, an inflationary factor is used. But you will notice that the program funding is flat, and I believe that's where your question is coming from. So no, the program funding, we haven't used an escalator. And the primary reason for that is many of the facilities projects have specific and dedicated funding elsewhere. So you notice the Carnarvon Park is elsewhere, the public safety is elsewhere. So that program funding has been underutilized. So when we determine what the right sizing for that general funding program is, that's when it's certainly appropriate to establish that baseline funding and apply an inflationary increase.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Director. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, I'm not sure particularly who to address this one to, but just with regards to the marina structural repairs, and I know that when we looked over that report, there were sort of essential, had to happen things versus other, because I'm just wondering if someone can refresh me on the work that's taking place with that almost $1.4 million item.
Mr. Payne, are you able to answer that?
Absolutely, and I will invite Mr. Graham to add additional context to that question. But to speak specifically about this budget, it's very much a placeholder budget. WSP did for us an assessment of the marina and the works that were needed there. Those works essentially are on hold in anticipation of Turkey Head and the council's decision on the use of Turkey Head. However, Mr. Graham it does use the budget to ensure that life safety items are funded and maintained through as necessary, and so that's really what's being used. But there's no specific vision for that $1.4 million. The number is very old, and Turkey Head is undetermined. The use of Turkey Head is undetermined.
Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Director Payne, I've been trying to understand the concept of the placeholder budget. Like, obviously, we're at a point where we're looking at costs. So, like, when you say placeholder, can you elaborate more on, so these numbers aren't actually then filtering into the percentage of tax increase for our residents? Or can you just elaborate a bit more on how that works?
Yeah, Mr. Payne.
Through your worship, it's kind of, I would say, two questions embedded in that, and happy to answer. You know, the term placeholder budget really refers to council has directed staff to proceed with expenditures in some way, but it hasn't been scoped out clearly. So the public safety building is a prime example of a placeholder building. We really don't know what council's vision will be for the public safety building. There could be a myriad of uses, which produces a myriad of designs and a myriad of costs. When those costs are produced, Class D or better, then the placeholder budget is replaced with a more specific budget. In terms of the funding mechanism, the marina structural repairs are first and foremost funded from the Marina Reserve. The Marina Reserve is funded by an annual transfer to reserve, and then there's also the Capital Works Reserve for that. So the way that the district funds its capital is 100% from reserve. So it does reduce the discretion on council to use the capital budget to reduce the tax increase. Because essentially, if you reduce the capital, you're just reducing how much comes out of reserve. You, on the other hand, council, you being council, have the choice to reduce the amount of money we're choosing to put into reserve every year. That is funded by taxation. And then essentially what we do is we prepare 5-year forecasts of our reserves. We anticipated with our sustainable infrastructure replacement plan that because of the deluge of infrastructure that needs replacing, there will be a point at which we just don't have capital replacement reserve balances and we need to take on debt.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Payne. Are there other questions? Before we go back to second-time speakers, I'm just going to go to any other questions. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Just as a follow-up to Councillor Smart's question, I guess it is appropriate, and thank you, Mr. Payne, also for the explanation of this. And I do appreciate having this budget because at one time it wasn't in the package, and then if things came up, quite often they got deferred when maybe they shouldn't have. So it does give us a little bit of flexibility. But perhaps the appropriate question here to ask is because now we do have a facilities manager on staff, is in your tours of the facility, have you seen any change in conditions that give you cause to believe this money will be imminently used on the facility?
I think Mr. Graham is probably for you.
Sorry, just for some clarification, were you talking the marina in particular? The marina right now, we've been working on reactive capital replacements, rooftop units, HVAC systems, and building envelope. There are large structural projects that we would have to look at, and that's where council would have to make some decisions on the future of Turkey Head and whether that money would be appropriate to put into the building or not.
So just for clarification, though, you're not going to be coming to us next week and saying, I'm going to need that $1.3 million. You don't think?
I don't think, no. At the moment, I don't have the capacity to take a project like that on. We are looking at several needs in the future that are going to be very important, but the future of that building will have to be looked at in more of a feasibility study format first.
Thank you. I don't see other questions. Mr. Graham, thank you. I think for those who have been watching our budgeting process over the years, facilities has been a gap in our visibility, and so it's great to start seeing some of the facility reviews and some of those sort of costs, and I think more importantly, being more proactive about maintenance on our buildings to prevent the large capital projects in future. So it's great to have you here as part of this, part of the team, and it shows in the capital plan here, so it's great. I don't see any other questions for the facilities portion of this, so perhaps I'll go over to you now, Mr. Payne, for the police.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just read the word washroom, so I just will, thank you, Your Worship.
I'll go by Waship, why not?
Your Worship, the police capital plan was reviewed and approved by council early on in the year. So again, I don't have any further comments to add. The police department has kindly shown up if there are any questions from council on the capital items.
Yeah, thank you. I know we had questions on this at the time the budget was approved, so I don't anticipate many questions, but I don't see any hands popping up. So, Councillor Appleton, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I kind of ask similar questions about fire apparatus, but and the marginal return to the municipality may be almost nil, but what does one do with a surplus police vehicle, and does that return any revenue to the municipality when it's disposed of?
Chief Fisher.
Through Your Worship, in the past, yes, it has. Minimal, I would say, at best, given the age and the previous use of the vehicles. In this instance, when we're speaking about this year, our intention is to keep one of the vehicles, given the fact that we're transitioning to a fully electric fleet and getting further along that road with the addition of 2 new vehicles this year. We're concerned to some degree around a disaster situation or something where we're restricted to that and the potential implications of that, giving limited charging infrastructure. So we think it's prudent to keep at least one of the older vehicles aside and within the fleet, so that we have access to a vehicle that is properly equipped and effective as an emergency vehicle in that instance, given the limited value we would get on a sale of it.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to follow up to that, and this may be for Director Payne, but at any rate, are there disposition costs to end of life of any of these equipment pieces?
Chief.
To the vehicles, no, not in my past history. In part, we haven't, because we've, as you said, been able to sell them. Some of the equipment we've been able to transfer over to other vehicles in most cases. And the other equipment that we're looking at this year, no, there's a bit of a small portion of IT equipment. And then I think 1 traffic radar, so no.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions here. So before you go, so Chief, this is probably the last time you'll be in front of us as a council. Our chief is retiring, coming up here at the end of May. So just on behalf of council, thank you so much for all your many years of work for the community and what you've built in terms of really astounding and positive community policing organization. So really do want to express our appreciation for all your time and work, and pleased to have soon-to-be Chief Constable Karen here in the room with us as well. But I just want to take a moment here to just say thank you for your time. Karen, not Shannon. Sorry, I don't want to have like they're coming out wrong. Mayop, whatever. On to fire protection. Oh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will invite the fire chief to join me as there's some new budget requests, and certainly he will be able to articulate the use and need of those budget requests slightly better than I am. But I will introduce a couple items here in the fire capital plan. And first of all, I just thought we'd take a positive note and recognize some success with our recent procurement of our new engine and our new ladder, which are going to be complete shortly and delivered shortly. I think the timing at which we put in the purchase orders for those could have been bad had we not initiated those purchase orders. For instance, the ladder truck that we purchased for $1.8 million, now the replacement cost is around $2.5 million. And the engine, which we purchased for $1.2 million, now would need to be $1.7 million. And that's not even taken into fact the fluctuating US dollar, which poses additional risks. So overall, the timing of which we ordered those fire trucks, there's some savings, about $1.1 million. And yeah, it was right before COVID. So just a positive note there. We have some other items here that are new in the financial plan when you compare them to the 2023 financial plan. The first will be the temporary apparatus storage bay for $777,000. Council will recall that that purchase was approved previously. Administration suggested that we go ahead and purchase that using our reserves to fund that, repaid with the lease budget that we were going to use to lease it. And there was a financial return there, a clear financial case for that. So that's been included in this budget as well. We have included a new budget item for electric vehicle charging infrastructure to the tune of $42,000, but we were able to repurpose existing budget to make that happen. Previously, there was electric vehicles that exceeded the cost that's presented in this budget. So we used that budget, recognizing that we needed to have electric vehicle charging infrastructure to ensure their availability as well. Plus, one of the electric vehicles was downscoped, so reduced in size, to also help fund that. So you will see that there's a change in the electric vehicle budget as well, downward, and that more than funds the electrical vehicle charging infrastructure that's being requested as well. Furthermore, in the capital plan is a fire hall kitchen improvements plan for 2025. I'm just doing year end, so I'm always struggling to remember what year I'm in right now. So yeah, 2025. The kitchen renos would include countertop and cabinet door replacements, which haven't happened in quite some time. Further on, there's digital LED fire extinguisher training equipment, which would provide training for all citizens and provide quite the advancement for accessibility training as well. There's Fireland fire response equipment proposed for in the amount of $35,000 proposed for 2026, and that funding would enhance the Fireland firefighting capacity for fighting fires in the district's parks and trails, as it would provide a reliable water source to fight fires in those sort of settings. And then lastly, the battalion replacement cost has been increased. The estimates in the previous plan were pre-COVID, so an additional $50,000 has been added to that project budget, so up to $240,000. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, and then Councillor Green.
Thanks so much. So the electric charging stations that we're going to be having, do we share those between police and fire? Or is there a capability to share them between police and fire?
Through His Worship, for a cost? No. Yes, absolutely. There is an option to, always looking for revenue opportunities. Yes, there is definitely an opportunity to share. And Chief Fisher did touch on the point with regards to post-disaster charging capability. So one of the things that we're working with Mr. Graham on is to do a couple of pieces of critical research. So what is the municipal capability from the municipal power grid to support our charging capability, as well as what is our ability to hook into our backup generator? And I do need to be really clear that if we can't get backup charging capability, then we're probably better off moving to a hybrid until we're in a position where we are into a new facility that can support adequate charging requirements.
Thank you. And then I'm assuming that any electric charging stations that would be associated with fire and police would not be available for the public because they would also always have to be on call, let's say, for the police and the fire.
Through His Worship, that is correct. The other piece I forgot to charge. And to meet fire business requirements, we're talking about vehicles that require no less than 80 amps of service. And an 80 amp service for an F-150 Lightning, which is one of the few vehicles of that size that meets our business needs, is it's 8 hours to do a charge at 80 amps. To do a fast charge, you can it's just under an hour. So the power demands are substantial.
Thank you. And then I think this question is to Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne, when you talked about the U.S. dollar, it made me think that I'm not sure if I've ever asked this question before, but do we hold a U.S. dollar account that or do we watch the market so that we can purchase U.S. dollars? Because a lot of our fire equipment is purchased from, all of it I think is purchased from the States. So do we hold a U.S. dollar account, and do we watch the market to purchase U.S. dollars at favorable moments?
Mr. Payne?
To Your Worship, excellent question. We do have a U.S. dollar account, but do we keep it funded? Not really. And there's a specific reason for that. The community charter outlines the investments we're allowed to invest in, and there's some legal opinion as to whether or not hedging it would be even permitted under the community charter. But what we do in order to mitigate and offload that risk is when we issue a purchase order for a fire truck, for instance, they then go and purchase a future so it's locked in as soon as it's done from the first place. But there is the risk if once approvals are in and the U.S. dollar is difficult, we will lock in a difficult rate. But it's like anything, any of our investments. If I were able to predict the currency exchange, I would be a rich man. Same with the bond market yields and all that. So really, our best strategy is to plan for funding when it becomes available and when it becomes necessary in our capital plan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patterson? Oh, sorry, Councillor Green and then Patterson.
Thank you very much, and through you, and thank you, Chief McDonald. Just a question on, I'm really pleased to see the wildland fire response, and the reason being, we live on an alleyway that's not paved, and it's not mowed either very often unless we do it ourselves, but it is a real concern, and I think this comes from having lived on the edge of Dean Park, which is a wildfire hazard area. So I really appreciate that this has been added, and thanks so much. And trails, I'm assuming they would include unpaved alleyways as well. Would that be right? Or is it just like Brighton Trail or a park trail? Thank you.
Chief?
Through His Worship. So the equipment that we're talking about it's portable pumps, lighter hose for fighting wildland fires, large water bladders so that we can, we lose our hydrant system, that we can tanker shuttle to that. Or we can pump out of a hydrant or from our trucks to the bladders in the middle of a park or in any sort of harder to access area while we protect our rolling stock. So our rolling stock being our $2.5 million ladder truck or our $1.7 million engine. You do not want to put those in a high-risk environment. You'd much rather lose a relatively cheap water bladder than a truck.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Patterson, then Appleton.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to our fire chief. Thanks for that information. Just to follow up also on that, the new proposed equipment. I know the province certainly is very involved in and has programs of funding available for hazard risk assessments and particularly mitigation of wildfire risks. So I'm just wondering if there are if there's any talk coming down from the province or perhaps any granting streams available for any equipment like this.
Chief?
Through His Worship, there are some funding streams, absolutely, that are available. Sometimes there are requirements that the district may require something like a community wildfire protection plan in order to qualify. So there are steps to do that. I have done them before. They are a substantial body of work, which goes into capacity and work plans. This is probably a little easier way for us to go, and maybe doing a community wildfire protection plan might be good to look at in the next few years. But right now, it's pretty tough. And then I also should say that the impacts of something like a community wildfire protection plan on some of our cherished sort of fragile ecosystems can be, you can end up having some very severe impacts as far as what the wildfire managers recommend, such as substantial fire breaks up against all parks up to in the neighborhood of 100 meters. So when you think about our wildland infrastructure and the impact of that, as opposed to a more active fire protection approach versus a fire smart mitigation strategy, they're all competing pieces. There's no simple model there, but yeah. Long story answer is though, yeah, there are funding opportunities, but potentially at a cost.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the chief. I don't want to stray too much into operational matters here, but I just get the chief to refresh my memory about, with respect to the battalion replacement, sort of upsizing or sort of adding some additional funding to provide a different type of vehicle. And as I recall, when we had the discussion about staffing needs for the fire department, that the battalion vehicle was sort of a key piece to be able to respond in medical situations that wouldn't necessarily deploy the larger apparatus, as I recall. So can you just confirm for me that that's the case, that this would give us another option to deploy a relatively smaller vehicle in medical response situations that wouldn't require rolling a full-size vehicle?
Chief? Through His Worship, you are absolutely correct, Councillor Appleton. It's referred to as a right-size response model. Currently, we send a 40,000-pound engine with 4 firefighters on it to all medical aid calls, and when we do so, we have no fire protection capability. So moving to a smaller vehicle, which is smaller than our current battalion vehicle, and adding in 4-wheel drive capability to allow for better full 12-month response, especially in severe inclement weather. It's a much more effective way to go, whether it's cost, carbon footprint, or time.
Please continue.
Just one further question, Your Worship. Maybe not so much for the chief, but maybe for Mr. Payne, or maybe potentially Mr. Graham. As I recall, maybe just refresh my memory about sort of the temporary apparatus bay. Once the new facility is built, will no longer be needed. I think that we're projecting that the temporary apparatus bay will at least have some residual value at that time, or the possibility of being reused in a different function for the district, because the current funding model, we will own that facility or own that structure, as I understand it. So just looking to confirm that.
Mr. Payne?
Through your worship, that's correct. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the residual value projected was, but certainly it was part of our pro forma. And we did say, you know, at the end of the term, because we had a lease for 5 years that we were prepared to enter into before council was given that decision. We did project a residual value that was significant at the end of that time frame, and council could decide to do something different at that time.
Thank you. Don't see other hands or questions for Fire Chief at this point, so I'm happy to move on to the next item on the agenda, second to last, which is the Engineering and Public Works. We used to spend so little here, and now we spend so much. Welcome, Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Your Worship. You say second to last as if that sounds like we're close to being finished. And it's a significant budget, and the next one will be a significant budget as well. Probably 2/3 of the budget. Thank you thank you to my colleagues for joining me at the table. Your Worship, I just want to say a couple comments about our core capital programs. And when I say core capital infrastructure replacement programs, I mean storm, road reconstruction, sanitary sewer, and water. You will see increase to the value of those the program funding provided in this financial plan. Our strategy with that is to increase those core program funding to the maximum that we really have capacity in our engineering department to proceed with. And the rationale behind that is council has made clear the district's intention to replace as much of that core infrastructure as fast as possible, up to the capital output sustainability measures that we've established, which means that we're replacing a lot of our core infrastructure at a faster pace than it's wearing out, because there is significant deferral of that infrastructure that hasn't been replaced and that we believe should be replaced by now. So you will see those increases reflected there. I do believe, you know, sometimes the financial plan and what operations is able to accomplish is misaligned somewhat, right? The financial plan is a conservative overall budget approval for it. And sometimes, you know, it's rare, for instance, that our entire capital budget is spent in a year. I can tell you in 2023, we spent $13 million, but we had a $30 million capital budget. $13 million was record spending, but we seek overall council authority when we do that. So the capital program funding for the core infrastructure most likely is optimistic in terms of what we'll be able to achieve, but we certainly want to have those budgets established should capacity allow for the program to be undertaken. In terms of new budgets, in here you will see a sidewalk replacement program, and you know, very similar to other core capital infrastructure replacement programs, and often done in conjunction with road and other things. The engineering department looks for opportunities to replace core infrastructure together for maximum efficiency and best spending authority. Recently, a sidewalk condition assessment was conducted, and so that's the impetus to why this program was placed in there. And again, the engineering department would look for opportunities to program sidewalk replacement in conjunction with other major capital program spending. Program. This is the first time that capital program has been funded, and that would be programmed out through our engineering staff. $750,000 is being proposed per year. Recently, excuse me, I have to get my notes here. Recently, a condition assessment was conducted as well, and found that many of the streetlights were rated as being in very poor condition, and many were rated as being in poor condition. So this funding would target the replacement of those streetlights. Yeah, and that's my comments on that one. The next capital project in here that would be new is the Harrow Road. Just going to pull it up here. Here we go. Harrow Road Soil Transfer Site. We've established a budget there for the testing of soil from excavations before reusing or transporting the soil remediation. or disposal. Now, speaking of placeholder budgets, we haven't been able to cost out this in great detail. However, that is underway at the moment. We are hoping that this budget is somewhat conservative. If it is conservative, whatever the construction costs estimates end up being will be what is spent, not this budget here. But we wanted to ensure we had adequate budget in there so that we could proceed in 2024 should the estimates be similar or around that amount. Another capital project which is new to the financial plan is the underground fuel tank replacement. The fuel tank is beyond its envisioned useful life, which is over 30 years. The proposal is that it be replaced with the single hulled steel tanks, it'd be double hulled with fiberglass and above ground as well to mitigate potential impact to Bowker Creek as well as upgrade to normal standards as well. So the budget request there is $650,000. Thank you very much, Your Worship. That concludes the presentation on the new or changed capital project items for the Engineering and Public Works Department.
Thank you very much.
Would be sanitary sewer and the water works programs, but you'll notice those capital programs are simply continuing with the core infrastructure replacement.
Excuse me. Thank you for that. I have Councillor Smart, then Patterson.
No, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to whoever's most able to answer the question. I just wondered the use of the underground fuel tank, if you could just elaborate. I'm assuming that's fuel for the vehicles and perhaps equipment, but could you just describe what the use of that is?
Mr. Robertson?
Through the mayor, yes, it's for the vehicles at Public Works and small equipment that they use on a daily basis.
And because we are co-located with the Parks Department, we graciously allow the Parks vehicles to use it too.
Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to know long-term plan, how long does the fuel tank last? And although I know we still need fossil fuels in this bridging time, I guess I'm just curious what kind of investment, what kind of lifespan it has, what type of fuel it is, and if there's a foresight in which to switch as much as possible to non-fossil fuel.
Go ahead, Mr. Robertson.
Yes, through the mayor, the tank is unleaded gasoline and diesel, split tank, and we're putting it above ground so that we don't have any potential leakage in the future, but also were the facility to be changed at some point or we move to alternate fuels, it's a fuel package system that we could resell, and it's just safer to have it above ground. That's generally the way we go. Additional comments?
And further to the councillor's question about time frame as far as switching to electric vehicle alternatives, we do not currently have a timeline. Many of the pieces of equipment that we use do not have electrical alternatives. I will say that we are working on a feasibility study looking at bringing greater electrification to Elgin Yard, but that's at the very high level, and were we to look at adding charging infrastructure, that would have to come to this council to make a funding decision. Right now, that's just a very operational, high-level study.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Patterson and Appleton.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And through, I believe, probably to the perhaps the engineering staff on this one, but the Bowker Creek walkway railings, I'm just wondering, I believe that that's a carry forward project and it was a safety issue. And so I'm just wondering if there's a delay because of capacity to get the work done, or if it will be, in fact, the work will be done and we'll be paying out this money this year.
Through the mayor, there is a safety issue, and some of the most immediate needs can be addressed through operational funding. The larger capital replacement of the railings has been, I don't want to say delayed, but there has been some involvement with Bowker Creek Initiative and with the Parks Department to come up with a holistic view that users of that space will appreciate. And so that's essentially why it's been carried forward, is just looking for alignment between what is operationally useful and fulfills the desires that the engineering department has, which in some cases are quite different than the views and desires of Bowker Creek Initiative.
So just a brief follow-up. So is that a yes, it will be done this year? Or I'm left a little vague, wondering if the design will be brought together this year.
Mr. Rennick?
Through the mayor, the intention is to advance that as part of this year's work plan, along with all of the other things.
Thank you. I have Councillor Appleton and then Braithwaite.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I continue to be frustrated by this issue of having to create new infrastructure for this soil analysis and treatment piece. That's a significant, it is a significant impact to the community, and I'm actually frankly surprised that it's sort of passing into a direct need in our budget without it being more noticed, I guess, in the broader community. I'm concerned about it. I guess the question here is we need to make a significant investment because we need to create new infrastructure at the Harrow Road site because there is no space at the existing yard to do so. So that's a question. And also, is this the alternative being we could send it out to an external agency to store and test it externally? This is probably more cost effective to do it ourselves. Has this been the typical municipal response? Like our neighbors doing the same thing, and have we looked into shared facility management?
Mr. Robertson?
Through the mayor, we have spoken to, I know, City of Victoria in particular, who are doing the same thing, building a facility. We are challenged for space at Elgin Road to be able to store this much soil, given the size of the site. Also, part of the requirements is it's less expensive for us to keep it on a right-of-way. If we put it onto property, there's additional screening and paperwork that has to be done and more cost that goes with that currently. So that happens to be a right-of-way. And as Director Payne mentioned, it's a placeholder budget. We've been working with our consultants on the design. And we had hoped to have a revised budget for tonight, but we're probably just a few days away from that. And we're hoping that the costs will be substantially lower. And we are building, making it a more temporary facility without setting down foundations and that, but using lock blocks and more portable overhead covering to keep it dry. So trying to do it as minimally as we can.
Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to staff. Just as a quick follow-up, so the budget, and I appreciate that the budget is plastic at this stage of the game. The budget includes not just the physical components of the soil handling facility, but also some costs relating to the handling itself. So it's not just the physical structure that's included here, but also some of the costs associated with handling theoretically contaminated soil.
Mr. Robertson?
Through the mayor, this is, to a large degree, this is the construction of the site itself. There may be some operating component in there, but not for things like testing and trucking soil.
Thank you. I'm going to do one follow-up on that, and that's my recollection is we had about 300,000 net new annually added to this budget. One of the Nether's little 1-point-something% that gets added on that's been required for managing that. Is that number approximately correct, Mr. Payne or go ahead, Mr. Rennick?
Through your worship, that $300,000 is correct. However, that is an operational fund, not a capital fund. So that was to defray the cost of testing associated with servicing jobs. There's also testing and disposal costs associated with capital jobs, but we would simply roll those up into a capital projects budget. There's not a specific line item for the testing associated with capital projects.
Okay, so just for my clear, I appreciate that it is operational, not capital. But so for each capital project, the cost of testing and transportation, because I understand the transportation costs are quite elevated as well, having to go across the Malahat, are all built into each individual capital project. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. There's a significant amount of addition to our budget for something that's just thrown upon us. Councillor Appleton, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just as a follow-up to the follow-up. So just to be exquisitely clear, and I think I know the answer to this, but this is in direct response to a higher standard for soil handling being placed upon municipalities by revisions to the provincial contaminated sites regulation. Is that correct?
Mr. Robertson?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct.
Salty soil. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much. My question is around the electrical streetlight kiosks, which is a carry forward item from last year. And just that, obviously this, my question is this is going to get done for sure this year because of the new replacements light standards that we're putting into the uplands. So this is definitely going to be something that will be completed sometime this year or within this budget cycle, correct?
Go ahead, Mr. Rennick.
Through the mayor, yes, that is my understanding that it needs to be done ahead of having the new streetlights installed.
Thank you. I don't see other questions. I just had one question that wasn't asked, and that is just, and this is, I always hate asking questions that I should know the answer to. The foreshore infrastructure, maybe it's listed in here. I didn't see it. Just remind us what that amount is. I know we have a separate project for the McNeil Bay erosion.
Through Your Worship, the foreshore infrastructure is for small repairs to railings on seawalls. They get corroded by the salt spray. It's primarily railings. I think we might also do the odd, no, I was about to say the odd streetlight, but we're asking for funding for that, so it's pretty much just railings.
Railings, okay. Perhaps some small concrete work or something along that nature. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
This is a question to my colleagues on the soil remediation issue, and because we don't receive any provincial funding, is that worthy of a motion to take to UBCM requesting funding support for that program? So that's just a comment. Thank you.
It's a good question, and certainly one that you could, I'm not sure what the cut, we're not appropriately for tonight, though we could do a motion arising if that was the will of council to consider that. It's probably worth putting a bit of thought into it and coming back with a notice of motion. So, thank you. Well, I think the cutoff date is coming up very quickly for AVICC, is it not?
AVICC is
already passed? Okay. So UBCM. Okay, fair enough. That's right, Councillor Patterson, to see your hand again. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a follow-up on that, the foreshore infrastructure, there's a mix of projects in here. And could we just clarify, because it is in the capital budget, but is that done by district resources as opposed to outsourcing?
Mr. Rennick?
Through Your Worship, I would actually need to check my facts on that. I believe in the past it was done by district staff, and I'm not sure if that is still the case. So I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that. My excellent superintendent of public works, Mr. Brozick, tells me it is a combination of district forces and contractors.
Awesome, excellent. Your wireless system is amazingly efficient. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted some clarification on the active transportation program budget, especially in reflection of last night, because now that it's a combined budget and includes like general crosswalks and traffic calming initiatives, etc. And I gather that takes up, I think it was $700,000 of that budget. I guess I'm just looking towards the budget and wondering, do we still have the sort of 1.6 million set aside for the projects we were looking at last night, in addition to the $700,000 for these other items?
Spain?
Your worship, through your worship, to be clear, so we haven't integrated the resolution into this draft, and the way I vision it being integrated into the next version would be a separate line item, just to denote that program can be used for new infrastructure, because I think that's an important distinguish. And then in terms of programming the active transportation program, the engineering department would utilize those program budgets as appropriate to that. The way that the funding was approved last year is that it would build over a series of 5 years. So you would see the operating funds that needed to support the staffing first integrated into the operating plan, and then whatever remains over would build in the capital plan here, and you would see how much capital funding you have as a result of that.
Thank you. I have just any other hands here, just a question on, related to that as well. In the growing community funds allocations, there was, I believe, $750,000 allocated for active transportation projects. So I know we don't allocate, to specify in here where those monies are coming from, but would any of these projects then be pulling from that reserve essentially that we set aside from the growing community funds?
Yes, Your Worship. My basic instruction to the engineering department has been, since we established that active transportation grant contingent program here, $800,000, the instructions has basically been, if you want to spend that program, you have to find matching grant funds. The growing community funds was allocated, so that's one that could be used. I believe we would only have matching funds for that program in the first year, being $800,000. But then there's also some other grants that we received recently that we heard news about as well. So to answer your question, the growing community funds would be utilized in that active transportation program grant contingent line item right there.
That clarification, that's helpful. Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. I did want to clarify that because we had some correspondence from residents on the grant contingent part of that funding. So, for instance, if we had a project go forward and it didn't achieve the grant, that means we're spending $0 on active transportation. We couldn't spend the $800,000 on active transportation that year. And was that concept of needing to have the grant to even utilize that $800,000 council direction, or was that internal recommendation? Could you clarify?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through the 2021 through 2022 budget process, council had instructed that an active transportation program to this value be established, and what we identified in last year's financial plan was there was really no funding component identified, so it would have to be grant contingent in order to be included in the financial plan. And then that question of how to fund that was basically answered last night, right? Council opted to fund that program with a tax increase. So establishing this program starting in last year's financial plan gave us the ability to proceed with active transportation programs if we were able to find matching funds for the grants. So it opened up that opportunity. But really, to have ongoing funding, we needed to find a funding source, which was council direction from last night.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Don't see other hands. Oh, Councillor Patterson?
Yes, just for clarification, I mean, we've had a lot of capital programs going to catch up with everything that we needed to do. But I'm just wondering, for some of these things, I'll use the example of the Bowker Creek walkway railings. So we do it as a capital project in this budget, and then does it just, are we keeping an inventory of all of the equipment and costs so that it then starts to get into a consistent program of upgrade or replacement over time?
Mr. Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. At the very base level, we have a rudimentary inventory for all assets, and that's required through our financial reporting standards. It's not very usable for engineering purposes. Now, engineering has established a variety of databases for their infrastructure. I can't, and each inventory, the degree of sophistication and usability varies significantly. Obviously, for our core infrastructure programs, it's a lot more sophisticated because they need to be able to rely on that data. So the answer is, yeah, we have databases. The asset management software, if implemented, would consolidate those inventories and would also harmonize the financial reporting needs, which I see as actually subordinate to the engineering and planning needs, and it would harmonize both of those.
Continue.
Thanks. Just a quick follow-up to that then. When do we anticipate that we would have software workbooks available to consolidate all of the capital worksheets into one financial model?
Mr. Payne?
Your Worship, there hasn't been an established timeline. Now, Council has provided funding for the scoping of that project. And in fact, last summer, staff did scope the asset management software by doing a needs analysis with other departments. Using that needs analysis, we would then go out to RFP. You would have a sense of what the cost would be. At that point, staff would need to come back and ask Council really if they're willing to take on the life cycle costs of that, because with new software maintenance and staffing to maintain that database. So that funding has not been granted by Council because it hasn't been requested.
Thank you for that. I think we were hoping for the answer of Thursday, not that answer, but there we go. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thanks. And just going back onto the comment that you made, Director Payne, on the decision made last night around active transportation, and now that it's going to be funded by tax, and that now is I think I tried to ask this question last night, and I mustn't have asked it very well because I don't think I got the answer I was looking for, but it might be now. It might be now in the presentation that you gave, you have an active transportation plan line now on your 5-year tax increase forecast, and it shows a 1.15% increase for 5 years. So you're saying now that what happened last night is actually now you can quantify it by a 1.5% tax increase, which in my quick calculation is about $330,000 added into or worth about $330,000 ish for a 1.15% tax increase. Is that correct?
Mr. Payne?
Yes, Your Worship, 1.15%, which is the 5.75% phased over 5 years. 1.15% gets you $380,000 approximately, and then so the second year of that, you'd have $760,000 if I've done the addition right. I'm a CPA, I hope so, and then so on and so forth.
Thank you. Yeah, it would have been interesting for me to have realized that last night, and perhaps it was just too late for me not to realize that last night. But it would have been interesting because that's an interesting percentage. It's less than what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more around the 2.5% in the first year. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add on to that, with the way that the tax rate increase is being phased in, it means that there will be less money available in year one. However, it will allow us to focus on hiring the 2 staff. That's why Director Payne noted that in the first year, it will primarily be in the operating budget. But that will allow us, hopefully, to recruit the 2 staff and to start doing some of the high-level conceptual designs and consultation activities that we heard last night from the council and the public are so vital in building out the network.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is a very difficult question to answer briefly, but obviously the kickoff of upland sewer separation is the big budget line item incoming in 2024 and then extending into years subsequent. I think that we have heard in previous discussions around this project that this very much does represent a bit of an order of magnitude cost as well, and that any number of different things could happen as soon as shovels go into the ground. So I guess what, in brief, what would staff estimate sort of looks the iterative project looks like as this rolls forward? So at what point, once you start putting shovels in the ground, will you get a better read on whether or not this is a reasonable number or not? And that's not an easy question to answer, but I just know that with a project of this magnitude, contingencies can be significant.
Mr. Robertson.
Through the mayor, I'll try and tackle this one. Working with our consultant, there was a larger contingency put in the budget than we normally would on a project. And also with our consultant, there was extensive testing done, so identifying areas of rock, contaminated soil, and then additional testing was done to really narrow in where that contamination was rather than the larger test holes we would normally do. So we've taken a lot of steps with them to try and narrow down the potential things that could go sideways. I mean, obviously, in a project this size, yeah, there's things that are difficult to account for, but I think we've done quite a bit of due diligence to try and capture as much of that as we could up front.
Yeah, please continue.
Just a quick follow-up, Your Worship, and I appreciate that. In terms of contingency and in terms of testing, has the contingency considered the possibility of encountering remains, encountering basically archaeological components?
Mr. Robertson?
Through the mayor, our consultant, their sub-consultant, has done several reports about mapping out potential sites and known sites, and they have the expertise on site monitoring. So I think there's always a potential there'll be more than what was known from all the records we had so far, but that would be something that the contingency would address. But yeah, we're hopeful that we've contained as much of that as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
That was my question. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Don't see any other hands at this point for questions, so that was a big chunk of things. Thank you very much for the engineering department. It is 9:20.
That went by so fast.
It probably did for us, but maybe not for people in the audience. So I'm going to just give the opportunity, if anybody from the members of the audience, either online or in person, wishes to ask questions or make comments, you're welcome to do so again at this time. And then we'll get on to the last department of capital project, which is Park Rec and Culture. And then we'll get back to some of the conversation around the project or the budget as a whole. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address council? Is there anybody online? Again, if you're watching the YouTube stream and you call the 855 number, you would hit *9. That's not #9. It is *9 to raise your hands. Yes, welcome back.
Maggie Knight, Oak Bay. Just two questions. So to be clear, while there's sort of placeholder money in this current capital plan for sidewalk replacement, there's no placeholder envelope for new sidewalks. Is that right? And that's pending conversation. But does that mean then that anything that when that sidewalk and pedestrian sidewalk master plan comes, that anything that was new sidewalks would just be, you wouldn't get to that until the next sort of cycle of budgeting? Is that how that works?
Fundamentally, that's true. That's correct.
Okay. And then in terms of, just so I have clarity and can help manage people's expectations, in terms of the active transportation spending that was talked about last night, I think I heard Deputy Rednick talk about the focus this year being operational and getting the new staff on board. I believe from the McNeil conversation that at this point, given the utility upgrades, we are looking at next spring as kind of the earliest that residents would actually kind of see meaningful change on the road. Is that right? And what does that, how quickly does it phase into how things change? Like, do we have more projects that are likely to be ready for grant intake in the fall? I know that there are 3 in the design process. So I don't know if that's possible or appropriate in this moment. I know it's very kind of detailed into one area, but I'd love to understand that a little bit better if that's possible.
I think it's fairly easy to answer those questions. Go ahead, Mr. Robertson.
Through you, Mayor. We anticipate that we'll be ready to start the infrastructure work possibly by this winter, possibly late fall, depending on how the design goes. We're out to tender right now. When the construction happens, we won't have 2 distinct contracts. We'll have a contract that will do the utility work, and we'll be doing the surface infrastructure behind. So there's an efficiency there, but also it should shrink our timeline in that we're not having one contractor pull out, another one come in. As far as projects, and this was a little bit missed last night, I think, is that project is in the works, and we got the grant for it, but also the Haltane and the Estevan projects are in design phase right now, and so we're our goal is to have that ready for grant intake for this October. So those hopefully will come right after the McNeil project.
And I think just following on that for clarity, that this year will also be used for doing the detailed design for the next phases, so that would be the year after, like seeking grants for some of those additional projects. And those priority to those projects is going to be directed somewhat by the underground infrastructure readiness, because obviously those drive some of those other projects as well.
If I could ask a follow-up, I just wondered I know that hiring can be a challenge and it takes time to get people in and takes time to get people skilled up and onboarded and all of that. So I was just wondering how much that's likely to just like cause other people to down tools on things currently, and does that actually temporarily delay some of the things and moving forward? Well, of course, it'll make it go faster later. Because I know some people are going to be, where's my bike lane right now? Didn't we approve it? And obviously that's not how it works. So let's make sure we understand.
Mr. Robertson?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any bike lanes we can roll out, which would be nice. The existing, those 3 contracts or projects, sorry, we have been working out with existing staff to get those prepared. And yeah, it certainly will take a while to get the jobs posted and to do the hiring that we need to do, and hopefully attract new staff in this area. So with existing staff, we'll do the best we can. We have to get contracts out because it won't be a continuation of the current contract, but we'll have to get new contracts out for these new designs so we can start that work, fitting it in with the work plan we've already have for this year.
Thank you for that, Mr. Robertson. Any other members of the public wish to talk to council at this time? Oh, I have one member of the public online. You can unmute yourself. Welcome, and just introduce your name and municipality of residence.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. It's Eric Zelka from the Oak Bay. Can you hear me all right? Oh, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for this dry but important work that you're doing. Rather critical, and nice to see a number of projects moving forward, and projects that have been in the works for years. So it's great to see that we're moving forward on this. I did want to ask sort of in 3 areas. The first area has to do with the master plan for sidewalks. When will we have a chance to see some details as to what the sidewalk master plan or whatever it's called will be looking like in terms of design? And is it intended just a mediation or remediation of what the design that's been there for decades, or will there be an opportunity to redesign the sidewalks maybe in a more modern perspective?
Sure, through me to you, Mr. Robertson. You heard the questions, go ahead.
Through the mayor, the master plan is complete. We don't have the condition assessment. We have our first draft of it. So we're working with the consultants there's always a process of going back and forth to make sure it satisfies our needs. And we expect to be able to deliver those together sometime in Q2 this year to council. And if the budget is approved, we've put the new ask in for the 500,000. The initial response for that would be to deal with the things that are shown to be critical in the condition assessment report, and then there'll be a place then where we can start planning out what the master plan shows as far as either widening existing infrastructure, adding new infill infrastructure as far as the sidewalks go.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Zelka?
Oh, yes, thank you. So if I understand correctly, I mean, some of the other projects appear to be trying to, in some ways redesign and maybe modernize the sort of road infrastructure. And I would hope that there would be some intention to redesign and modernize the sidewalk infrastructure as well. So it sounds like we're sort of heading in that direction. I think that's great. The second area I wanted to ask about is about the marina. Just wanted to ensure, I may have missed it in this particular financial plan, but is there intentions to be spending money on the marina this year with respect to the critical, from what I understand from in terms of public knowledge, the areas that are quite critical in that area, and seeing that of course the whole project lives on. This is well past its current life cycle, shall we say.
Yes, we did have an answer on that a little earlier. Is Mr. Graham still here? He's not. Oh, he is. Or I'm not sure if anybody else at the table right now could answer the question. Mr. Payne?
Your Worship, yes, thank you for the question. Currently, there is a budget established for the marina. However, the spending in that budget is concentrated only on life safety measures and general maintenance. Any structural changes or expenditures would come after council's decision on the use and vision for the Turkey Head area.
You were breaking up a bit there, Mr. Zelka, so I'm not sure if you heard that answer.
I did. Thank you very much. I did hear that. May I ask one last question then, which is just wondering where we're at in terms of the total estimated tax increase at this point in our in the deliberations?
Well,
are we at 15%, 12%, 9%?
I think that the current right now is about 10.4. But we haven't yet had a chance to sit down and go through and make any decisions on addressing that. So that's essentially the cumulative impact of
Great.
the forced growth in the other projects.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address council? Okay. I see no other hands online, so let's come to Parks, Rec, and Culture. Mr. Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I'll be that are new or the value has changed. But again, council and the public shall feel free to ask questions about any of the projects in the capital plan. The first project that I'll draw council's attention to is the Carnarvon Park building and park design. and build. You'll notice the funding requested for the 2024 year is $723,000. That's up by over $40,000. Just wanted to let council and the public know that that $40,000 plus is grant funded portion for feasibility study to feasibility study of net zero energy consumption. So we received a grant through the FCM for that, and so that's what's increased the price there. And with any luck, that would improve the life cycle costs, or at least would provide council and the public with insight into the design. The next project that I'll draw your attention to is the field lighting, which is new, $120,000. This project would fund improved lighting for sports fields. Future requests for improved lighting would likely come in the capital plan, but this one in particular would focus on Windsor and provide lighting for some poorly lit sections of the field. The next project in this capital schedule is the Henderson Court resurfacing. Budget request being $300,000. Purpose of that budget request is really to maximize the life cycle of the structure there. And so the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department has turned its attention to reducing life cycle costs by engaging in proactive maintenance, and that's what that would be for. Much of the 2028 projects that are being requested are life cycle replacement of existing infrastructure, such as the case with the switchgear and breaker panels. It is significant, $242,000 being proposed, which is why it's separated into a separate project as opposed to being rolled up into a program. And similarly, you have the tennis bubble rotating door, $375,000, which would not just be a life cycle replacement of the existing rotating door, but accessibility upgrades as well, provide opportunity for people with mobility challenges to use that door as well. I do apologize, Your Worship, the description for that capital budget isn't in the current version. It's just something that I missed, so we'll make sure that that description is integrated in the final version. And Your Worship, I think if you agree, probably best to pause at each schedule. There's about 4 major capital programs for Parks, Rec, and Culture. And rather than going into the next program, this would be a good place to pause for any questions the council or community may have.
Happy to do that. Are there any questions on this schedule? Yeah, please go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
I apologize, Your Worship, because I'm asking a question that I've asked before, and but it's a fairly simple one. Is the Monterey roof replacement also the library roof replacement?
Thank you, through the mayor. My understanding is yes, it's the whole roof, but I may need to confirm that. So.
Mr. Graham, you wish to, well, you can come to this table if you wish.
Through your worship, it was looked at as the overall complex, the overall structure of the building, which incorporates the library.
Thank you. Are there any other questions related to the Park building design? Obviously, there's design work going on with a lot of various options. So I'm curious about the number that's in there. Is that a top line number, the absolute maximum? Is that sort of an average of there's an $8 million in 2025 for the Carnarvon Park building? I'm just curious about where that number is where that sits in the estimates, because I know there's quite a range of options that are possible. Go ahead, Mr. Graham.
Through your worship, we chose a mean value based on the original 2019 report for the larger field house. Of course, we'll be bringing options back to council that will include daycare, which actually could receive significant grant funding, so it may not affect the budget too much, as well as housing options, which could affect the budget quite a bit. So that, again, is a placeholder budget based on the original 2019 report, including inflation.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you. A follow-up on the Carnarvon Park building. when it comes back, some of the feasibility portions of it come back, and the design comes back to council, will it come back with some sort of a pro forma analysis of the revenue stream for the various options?
Yeah, Mr. Graham?
Through the mayor, yes, it would be part of life cycle and overall costing that we would look at revenue options.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions on this section? Nope. So why don't we continue, Mr. Payne? So you're on page 152 now, is that correct, for the capital?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Page 152, 156 in the agenda. So the items I'll identify in here, there's an Oak Bay Rec Center General Equipment Program Fund. Generally what we do is we identify any capital projects, single capital projects that are over $100,000. We identify those differently, describe them. So there's several less than $100,000 projects proposed in that. Some of those things include, they're just going to be really facilities, life cycle replacement stuff, air handling equipment, 2 of those, kitchen exhaust, floor scrubbers, dining room furniture, and that makes up the bulk of the 2024 amounts, and similar life cycle cost replacement for Oak Bay Rec Center general equipment. One new capital project in this schedule would be the audio paging system. Components of the current audio paging system are old. Some of them are exceeding 30 years, but that system itself has received a patchwork of upgrades over that 30 years. Some are newer, and that creates a bit of integration issues. And so the proposal here is to replace the entire system with a modern, consistent, integrated paging system. Improving operations at the facility there. And then the last capital project to highlight, which was different from the previous years, would be the heat recovery ventilators, and that's simply the life cycle replacement of the heat recovery ventilators at Oak Bay Rec Center Fitness. Thank you.
Staff on this. Let's move on to Councillor Patterson.
Just a question. I don't like to get into the operations too much, but I'm just wondering, when staff are going through this, do you work on a basis of looking at potential savings of putting in new equipment, so that you will either accelerate your recommendation to bring it to council because the savings will actually pay for the project, or does it just go by the age of the equipment and replacement at the time that it is scheduled for replacement?
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you. Through the mayor. There's a number of factors that is one of the factors we would consider. Probably the primary factor we need to consider is the integration with other mechanical systems within the building and how they impact each other and what that looks like. So in some cases, and what we're working on and have worked on the last couple of years is that integration piece. Where can we start to package those major replacements and life cycle replacements together? So in some cases, the fitness center is one of those where we're looking at a renovation in 2027, and the heat recovery ventilators was an additional cost that we looked at needing to do and thought, well, makes more sense to package that all together and move it forward in that sense, because it does also minimize impact on customers.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you so much. And I'm looking at the Henderson Kiwanis Park playground equipment, and I'm wondering, with that, and I guess in 2026, the Carnarvon Splash Park, those 2 parks are parks that are local groups help us with fund-wise. So the Kiwanis, obviously the Kiwanians give us money often for playground equipment, and the Carnarvon Splash Park, the Rotarians do. Does this budget include something, or are those groups giving us money towards this?
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the mayor. Actually, interestingly enough, in working with both Kiwanis and Rotary over this last year, Rotary has this time focused on an accessible piece of equipment for the Henderson Kiwanis Park. It gets a little kind of convoluted in there, which is called a We Grow Round. It's quite a neat accessible piece of equipment that Rotary is supporting to fund. That was partly because Kiwanis is particularly focused on establishing the Moby mats, the mats down to the beach at Willows. So between all parties, we had those discussions, and that was kind of the decision of who was focused on what this year. Not quite sure what future years will look like yet, but I'm happy to report we're in very constant discussions with those groups.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite.
And thank you. And actually, the Moby mats was my next question. So the Moby mat that we have down there that Kiwanis and Rotary helped fund is very well used, I understand. So I'm wondering, is there a plan for more of those?
Meikle?
Thank you, through the mayor. Yes, there is plan for another one of those. We are taking the second one would be closer to the tea house, although we believe there's a bit of concrete work needed there. So we're just in that kind of assessment analysis phase of what that might look like.
Wonderful. It's great for the accessibility. And just, I'm so thrilled, and I know others will be, to see the amount of money that we're putting into the playgrounds, because that's such an important, it's an important part of our community. And I think that it's something that we haven't had the opportunity to put a lot of money into that in the past. And so it's great to see the line items now and moving forward there. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And although I would not have raised this, but Councillor Braithwaite already did raise the question of the Moby mats, and the questions I'm getting already is, when does the mat go down at the end of the Bowker Promenade? Because people are starting to use the beach and they're looking for the mat.
Thank you. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I don't have a specific date, but I will look into that as soon as possible. We generally had talked about mid to late April, but that could probably be expedited.
Thank you. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you. Just a comment, and thank you very much, Mr. Meikle. I want to follow on Councillor Braithwaite's comments about the playgrounds and parks, because we've had so many families approach us in my time on OPE Council, asking for upgrades, asking for improvements, asking for expanded equipment, and so on. And so I'm really pleased that this is coming forward like in this fashion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I will move on, not seeing any other hands, to the next section.
Got a head start on discussing, which is quite fun. And you will notice, as you have noticed, is that much of the parks and playground, much of the playground replacement budgets have been increased. That's a direct result of council's decision to allocate growing community funds to that. Furthermore, the Parks, Rec and Culture Department is complementing the workforce with contracted services to get those built as well, previously done by internal staff. So that allows the internal staff to stay very busy with the work that they already have, as well as accelerate the playground replacement. And it sounds like Henderson Kiwanis is it's coming quite along. And so that is why you see larger budgets for the playground replacement and a quite well-populated playground replacement program moving through to 2028. Another addition to this schedule would be the Uplands Parks Boardwalk, which that was a direct council resolution to have that placed in there. So I won't spend much time with that context. The water fountain replacement program, the current focus for that would be along Beach Drive and Willows Park, but that's program funding, so it's not a specific project. It could be used for other water fountain replacement program, water fountain replacements in general. And then lastly, you've got the Carnarvon Splash Park and Playground project in there. I do believe that this would appropriately been in previous versions of the financial plan. So the $8 million that's been in the capital budget for the building has been restricted strictly to the building. So it's a bit of an oversight on my part, not recognizing that really we're planning on redesigning the entire site there. And in fact, the design stage of that project is the entire site. It's the most cost-effective way if council does want to redevelop the entire site there. So there's the inclusion of that in there. That is proposed to be debt funded, which is included in the debt funding numbers that we discussed in the previous meeting. Thank you, Your Worship. That concludes this scheduled presentation.
Thank you. I think we already tackled. Mikkel, go ahead. I'll try and answer your questions.
Yeah, sorry, not a question. I just wanted to clarify and pleased to say that the Kiwanis Henderson Park Playground should be completed this week. So we'll have a bit of a soft opening and then look to do an official opening later in April.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next section, I guess. Good? Yeah, we still have some work to do, but.
So, Your Worship, take your lead on the next steps if you wish. I can go back to the original slides that discuss the tax increase options as well as motions to achieve those, or any other direction that you wish to go.
I think we should go back to that slide now and have a conversation about it. We may or may not be able to resolve it all tonight. But I do want to give a chance, as I see a hand raised online and just so people in the audience. If anybody wishes to have additional comment or questions, I'd like to give them the opportunity to ask those. So I'll go online first where the hand is raised. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. It's Eric Zelka. Just one last question, if I may. And I very much, again, appreciate all the work you're doing. I'm really pleased to see that a lot of infrastructure is being replaced and upgraded and modernized. In the past, back in the 2010s, leading up until 2016, a lot of the sustainability and climate change work was focused in Parks Rec area, Parks Rec and Culture area, and sort of led by them, resulting in Oak Bay being declared a carbon greenhouse gas neutral, and the reports after that showed Oak Bay District was greenhouse gas negative, in fact. Just wanted to ask whether, I know as a result of the NDP government coming into power, the CARA program, which was sort of measuring all that stuff, was canceled. Has the greenhouse gas reductions accounting been continued as a result, and is possibly capturing all of the great work being done by our staff, so that we can measure not only the cost savings, but also measure the impact and how we're making the environment better?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Zelka. That's a good question. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Payne to talk a little bit about how that is being tracked and managed. Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and a good point raised by the Member of Public. The CARA program did discontinue, which with it discontinued our requirement to report out on some of that information. However, we did continue to collect and prepare that reports, just in anticipation of that. If there were to be a bridge to a new program, we wanted to see that continuity of data. It's not it hasn't been publicly published. It hasn't been published like it has, but we have retained that data in case we want to have that, that content and be able to see the trends. And furthermore, the new program that's replaced the CARA program, the Local Government Climate Action Program, does have reporting requirements. And this financial plan funds the senior planner for climate action position, which would be responsible for that reporting.
Anything else, Mr. Zelka?
No, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak to council at this time? Not seeing any other hands popping up, so I'll come back to this table. We'll move on to this section, but go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. I was wondering, Mr. Payne, if you could go to your pending changes to financial plan slide, which is a couple above that one, I think. Yeah. One down. Oh. That one. On the COVID-19 balance, you said in your presentation that there was a recalculation, no net deficit, reduced slightly, deferral, something like that. And I put a big star that says need explanation. So I'm wondering if perhaps you can give an explanation around that one, if you could.
If you don't mind, star need explanation.
Yes, Your Worship. So original projections were that we would have a starting COVID-19 restart balance that would be insufficient to fund the deficit at the Parks, Rec and Culture. So the difference was something we would have to make up for with a tax increase. And I believe that tax increase was 0.42%. It turns out we have enough of a balance to fund the full deficit this year. But if others, so next year we either have to incur a tax increase, service reductions, or increased user fees to fund that deficit. So that 0.42% really becomes a problem for next year, a problem for next year's budget. So although it certainly does reduce this year's, it hasn't gone away organically.
So it would be kicking the can down the road if we push it into next year rather than kept it into this year.
If I may, the one thing I would distinguish the difference is though it's not, I wouldn't say council's deliberate intention to kick the can down the road. We've been using that COVID-19 fund specifically because that's what it was for. And the decision of how to fund that deficit is to come to council. And so we just kind of had no choice in the first version of this, whereas the council will be provided with that choice with the pending PRC economic analysis, which will be for council.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Director Payne. I recall in late fall there was a report that came to council around, I believe it was budget surplus allocations to reserve, and that there was certain contributions that were made, and that we didn't resolve that in that meeting, and then it was going to come back to us. Can you just refresh my memory on whether that was all resolved and where the contributions for budget surplus went that weren't dictated by that report?
Mr. Payne.
Yes, through your worship, staff was directed to come back with options. Quite frankly, staff have not done that. So that surplus remains unallocated in our accumulated surplus. And then you will also have the opportunity to allocate surplus now from the 2023 financial year. I can share now that I'm forecasting about $1 million operating budget surplus as well, which would add to that balance to be allocated. So at some point, staff will have to come to council to make that decision. I think the challenge will be engaging council in a discussion such that the policy is in a place that satisfies council. So there was a policy before council. It turns out it didn't provide a solution for that allocation at the first time. So there was some work to be done with council to determine what an ideal surplus policy looks like. But at any time, council can allocate that surplus through the budget process, use it for this, use it for that. And when I and if I do that, I make council note of that.
Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. And I think I already know the answer to this, but just wanted to clarify. So there isn't any potential with the budget surplus allocating to do anything to reduce our tax increase reduction that we're looking at now. Just wanted to confirm my understanding of that.
Mr. Payne.
Your worship, you can use tax surplus. It has been used before to reduce your tax increase which just means that you have to have that tax increase in a later year, right? Because it's a finite funding source for an ongoing expenditure. So it's not a sustainable practice. Doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. And so what we do is we identify any one-time or infrequent costs, and we recommend that they be funded by surplus and reserves. So we already match those two funding sources. So I believe that answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Green?
Thank you, through you. Mr. Payne, and I know you've canvassed broadly, asking the public to weigh in and provide feedback on the financial plan. Can you give us any indication of what the nature of the feedback has been like to date? Are there any key things that stand out for you or that we should be aware of? Thank you.
Mr. Payne?
Conversely, I receive feedback on the budget when the taxes go out, so after the fact. And it's hard to generalize, but I will say that the citizens of Oak Bay, they engage in very thorough understanding and those conversations, and usually walk away with a really good understanding of the budget and support for the majority of the components in there. So, but again, I don't want to represent the views of everyone else. In this time around, I've received questions more than criticisms or suggestions for change, just more about explanations, and happy to provide to have that conversation with constituents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we tackle this page here and maybe the other page which has those pieces on it. If you might just go back though to that first page, I think this is an important context because the speaker earlier spoke to the cumulative capacity of carrying capacity of increases, and there's aspects of this that there's a lot of rational approach to the budgeting undertaken, but if you look at that bottom line number, I would suggest it's on the high side at this point because of course we build in cautionary inclusions on those things, but still these are very large numbers to be expecting people to carry on a year-over-year basis at 10.4, 13.7, 12.2, etc., and it drops down. So I just want to I think it's worth just noting the context of this, that this is something that we have to keep in mind. I would suggest those are probably not sustainable increases, and so as we're going through this discussion here, how we, are we spending monies in ways that also help reduce operational costs? Are there things that are good investments now that reduce the life cycle or long-term costs? I think we can make a very good argument for that for the infrastructure funding, for example. Because those are costs that are driving down longer-term costs. So I just think it's worth spending just a moment here, because I think any of us would look at that and think, okay, there's just no way, obviously, in the long term, people can support double-digit tax increases. I don't think we need to delve a lot more into that one. I think it's just a sobering reality of what that's looking like. Oh, yes. I can get a motion to extend the meeting by half an hour. I don't think we need to go past that tonight. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. I will suggest if we're going to need to get into a great deal of work here, then we may want to come back on the Thursday meeting. This meeting was scheduled to wrap up our capital discussion and to have ongoing discussion on Thursday. But if we, so this is really just a chance for us to go through this a little bit, and if we feel like we're at where we need to be, then we can finish this tonight, and if not, we can come back on Thursday. Councillor Green?
Not that I want another meeting this week, but I think we need some time to think about this as well, and I agree with you that I think another session, it wouldn't have to be a long session, hopefully, but I think we need to step back and take a good look. One of the pressure points now is that our tax increase has been published somewhere, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So it does put a bit of pressure on all of us, I guess, in a way. But I don't think I want to tackle with this tonight, frankly. But I'm certainly open to hearing what others say.
I think, so just my general take on that is, I would like all of council to feel they've have enough information to make a good decision. So I think if that's a general, if that's a feeling even by a couple of members, then I'm comfortable taking that time. So what I would like to do then, in the time we have remaining tonight, is let's have a conversation. And I really want to focus a couple of things. One on questions and answers on the next slide, which is the those other options. I think we want to make sure that we're all very clear about what the ramifications and implications of those are. And then if there are other questions that staff would need to go away and come back with to get some additional answers to, I'd like to kind of ask those questions tonight so that they can be ready with the answers come the next meeting. So that's kind of the context I think that we should be spending the remainder of our time on. And so I'll look around to this body if there's any questions. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Just before we start that, I just had a question in context about, because you just made the comment, Mayor, that you felt that the community, and I would agree, that double-digit tax increases aren't sustainable. And I'm one of a couple of other councillors at this table who will remember tax increases in the 1980s when we were facing high inflation and high interest. And so I do just wonder in perspective if there has been, and I don't expect staff to be able to answer this on the spot, but I do wonder in perspective if there has been a period in time when with some of the same pressures, Oak Bay residents have faced double-digit tax increases year over year. Because I am curious about that. I think there is some explanation that undergirds some of this that is unique for this particular period in time. I'm not saying that that's going to continue, and I know that we have benefited from some higher returns on investment to help lower this, but I am curious about that as we communicate our plans to the community when we think about what's happened in the past.
I don't know if any of the staff have answers to the historical increases over time. I can share, given that the majority of costs at any municipality are related to salaries. There was a time when the Greater Victoria Labour Relations Association was formed where there was 3 successive salary increases of, I think it was 12%, 14%, and 23% year over year each year. So I'm guessing that there were some tax increases commensurate with those amounts when that happened. That was in the 1970s. So, yeah.
You were in high school. Or no, you weren't.
Let's not contemplate that. Just get to know some history. So yes, there have been some very high times. It doesn't mean that that's still not important. But yes, I take your point. So thank you for that context question. Are there, do people feel comfortable with these pieces and understand sort of the ramifications? Are there any additional questions related to these at this point? Go ahead,
You mean feel comfortable by feeling comfortable to cut them or feeling comfortable to understand them?
I'm just asking if people understand them. I just want to make sure there's no clarifying questions or information that we need to come back to a future meeting required. I just want to give staff a chance to make sure that if they need some additional information or if there's additional questions, they have time to do that. Councillor Watson, back to you, then Councillor Green.
Yes, sorry. If I may, I would just like Director Payne to explain item 3. It's hard for to get my head around what that actually means.
Yeah, no, that's why we're here. Go ahead, Councillor Payne. Or Councillor. As soon as I get past 10 o'clock, my brain starts to go. Go ahead, Director Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, there's no clear way to write what I wrote, so I appreciate the question. So essentially what we do is we look at every single cost driver and see what the appropriate increase to that cost driver is. For wages, it's easy. We've got our collective agreement. For natural gas, it's easy. You have your rate increases. For contractual obligations, you have your contract. There are some general expenses that don't have necessarily a specific cost driver. General supplies, conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So for those, we apply a cost driver equal to the Victoria CPI at the time, which I believe was around 3.4, if I'm recalling correctly. So the suggestion here is that those, non-specific costs, we could reduce the increase to those budgets from 3.7 down to 2% essentially, and that would see throughout the budget a decrease in the tax increase of $150,000. Sorry, if I may just make the point about this is that if that approach is taken year after year, it essentially could be construed as a service level decrease. So just a caution with that, because if you aren't funding your expenses in accordance to the cost increases that are happening in the underlying, then really you're able to perform services to a lesser degree as a result.
Thank you. I had Green and then Braithwaite. Okay, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And just a little concern when you were talking about staff salaries. I think we have to be careful that we don't focus on, a single item like that. That I think in our rhetoric around taxation and our rhetoric around services and so on, I think we need to be cautious that we don't give the wrong impression, I guess, is my concern. And that no one, is profiled for any negative reason around taxation. So that's all. I was just concerned when you said staff salaries, and I'm sensitive to that on their behalf. So thanks.
Fair enough. And I think, for the most part, staff salaries are essentially tied to pattern bargaining set around the region and by the province. Appreciate that. I was just making the point that I know that was my one thing I did know was the salary increases that happened through collective bargaining in that era, and that drove that. Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite and then Appleton.
Thanks so much. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Payne, if there's anything that we've discussed tonight, and I'm going to use the soil remediation, which I believe came in at 1.7 million. That's the approximate what we think might happen with there. Is there any way that we could get better numbers on that before Thursday? Because my thinking is that if that came in, if we knew that was going to reduce by $400,000, then that would cover the 277 and the $100,000. That's about a 1.14% that it would cover, which actually then covers the 1.15, which we added in for the active transportation, and it brings us out to about the 9.68 or whatever it was, and then we're under 10. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that we know that we can get numbers on that project before Thursday that could help to mitigate some of this.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I think you may also want to, given that that's a one-time cost, perhaps the other question of the other half of that question would logically be the $300,000 operating cost portion of that portion. Mr. Payne?
Your Worship, yeah, that's precisely the issue, is that is funded from reserve. So if it comes in lower, we just have more money in the reserve. It doesn't impact the tax increase.
Yes, isn't there like $1 million here somewhere that we can just magically think? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is maybe a question for Mr. Payne, but also I think to a certain extent for Mr. Meikle. Looking ahead, and I appreciate the context being spoken to for the COVID-19 restart grant coming to an end. Obviously, one of the major drivers for tax increases over the next couple of years, as identified here, is essentially impacts to Parks, Rec, and Culture, and there's a lot of moving pieces to that. And I know that there's an analysis coming up that sort of analyzes fee rates and those types of things. What I'm curious about, just to confirm with staff, is the analysis that's going on, I think basically an elasticity analysis, I guess, of fees. Is the information that study will provide us going to be followed up by essentially almost like are we going to have enough information in front of us as council to be able to talk about the adjustments to fees, service rates, and taxation increases in time for next year's budget cycle? Will we have that information and a structured discussion around that? I feel like it's a standalone item. It could form part of a budgeting process, but for my mind anyway, I would love to have it as a standalone conversation because it relates to levels of service, which we don't talk to a lot around the council table. So just looking for confirmation that sort of that's the objective around that conversation, and that's where that study is going.
Your Worship, yes, the intention is to have that analysis before council for consideration before the next year's budget, and by default we've plugged the we've plugged the deficit in the tax increase. In all reality, you will choose something different, right? Some combination. And so, yes, the objective of the analysis is a price elasticity of demand for user fees, meaning, are there user fees that could be increased without impacting the demand such that the overall revenue reduces? Maybe there's some user fees that clearly can be increased at a faster rate than our broad increases. That can increase our revenues and reduce the need for a tax increase and or service cuts. So I believe the approach I would recommend when that comes forward is we would identify those revenue items that have small elasticity, inelastic demand, and the revenue solution that provides. The remaining deficit then could be brought to council for consideration in terms of service level adjustments and or tax increases. So, that's the envisioned approach. We have a first draft of that analysis. So it will be delivered to council outside of the budget process, but definitely within time for the 2025 budget.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, then Smart, then I'll speak.
Yes, just a follow-up question to my Councillor Appleton. I just wanted to know, were you asking that question in a way because you were hoping that that would be a pathway to reducing in the next cycle for possibly the number that we're looking at for 2025?
Verbally, yes, that was the answer.
Yes. Yeah.
Mr. Smart?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up again on a question that I had from the last meeting just to understand a little bit more, and that was just around the best practice of budgeting 100% for all staffing being filled, and just understanding that in the climate of what seems to be really hard to fill staff positions. And I wondered if it's possible to know what percentage of staff positions are typically filled per year, and again, like why it would be a bad idea to sort of conservatively assume we're not going to fill all of those and not budget 100% for the staffing that we've delegated. I just want to understand that piece a bit more.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Your Worship, I would say a floor for basically an operating budget variance is 5%. So 95% is usually the minimum that an operating budget gets spent, meaning that they're not able to spend the rest because of vacancies or other reasons. Now, the financial plan doesn't assume that there will be no vacancies. The financial plan funds the maximum potential service level that council envisions. And so funding less than that necessarily results in us not being able to achieve the maximum service levels. And there are municipalities, as I've mentioned, that just recognizes the reality that there will be vacancies. We won't be able to achieve those service levels, and reduces the taxes to compensate for that. It's a one-time reduction. It's not something that carries forward, so you can't have it as a solution in the next year. And also, quite frankly, it impacts your surplus. So you would not have a surplus, or you would have a much smaller surplus, or you would have the risk of having a deficit, in which case that surplus can't be allocated to one-time projects and funding. So it's a risk. It's a risk balancing act by council, and I'm just providing the financial context for it. And yeah.
Councillor Smart.
Thank you. That was really helpful. And then I didn't know if I clearly heard, I'm just not feeling like I'm aware of what percentage of staff positions are we filling right now? I just know it's been so challenging to get staffing. Is it 90% of staff positions that are generally filled, or what is there a vague sense? It's just too anecdotal for me to understand.
We need our Director of HR here. Mr. Payne, do you have a sense?
Your Worship, I can give a dollar figure, not a percentage of staffing, and I would estimate probably $300,000 in staffing vacancy surplus dollars. Every department is quite different, and the vacancy rates for that and the struggles for the positions, they're quite different.
Thank you. I know that anecdotally from staff that some applications, we have quite a few applications, and some we just have very few. So I'll go to you, Councillor Patterson, and then I'll come back to me. Go ahead.
Yes, Thanks, Mayor. Interesting conversations. I guess I'm going to probably have a different take on a lot of this, but I guess we're still at the place where there's not a lot of stability and predictability to the budgets, because in 2022 we said 2024 our increase would be 4.24%. 2023 we said 9.6. Now we're at 10.41. So, but that's not unusual when you're facing what we have been facing really the last, well, this is only my second term, but I did attend 4 years before that. So over those years, we had artificially suppressed tax rates. And that's part of the problem, of course, as we all know now. And so I still see a lot of vulnerability in the budgets, some of that because of the Parks, Rec, and Culture and the take-up of revenues, and we still have the costs that are there. We have significant capital costs now in this budget, including new buildings, and so there will be new life cycle costs coming up that aren't represented in this yet. So as I'm just looking at it and the options for tax increase reduction, I don't like the first two options simply because they're not good asset management practices. So the only one I would look at then, if we felt there was a need to reduce it in any way, I don't like using the third one, but if there was a strong desire to, that is one that I think I might support in this year, just knowing that there's still vulnerability going forward. But my concern is if we make an attempt to suppress too much this year, we are going to, I think, face the burden of more inflated costs in future years. So I would prefer to be very cautious about this, and it may need to have some strong communications out to the community and gaining support for what is in the budget. There are quite a few of the projects that are perhaps not core services. They might be more defined as discretionary projects. And so if I was looking to cut anywhere, then I would take a whole project and bump it out further. And we don't know. We might, by the time we get into some of the feasibility and the design plans, we may be doing that in the future. But so just looking at what is before us tonight, that's about the only one that I would support changing this year if we had to. Quick study on it.
I appreciate those comments. I'm just going to make a quick comment and go back to you, Councillor Green. I guess well, it's a question really, but I'm going to need a little preamble. My preamble is, philosophically, I think as a council, certainly for the last 5 years, we've been looking at how are we funding our core projects, our core services that we provide to the community. How do we operate those in the most effectively, most efficiently over the entire life cycle of the community, and that's included quite a bit of investment to draw, in capital, with the understanding that that'll drive down the overall life cycle cost of those over the lifespan, the 100-year lifespan, say, of some of these pieces. It's a lag, obviously, from the time that you're investing to the time that you're saving the money, because you're replacing pipes to prevent them from breaking and having those costs. I'm just curious, so that's sort of a longer-term philosophical approach. We do have some surplus, and we do have some other one-time, pieces that we could contemplate. I guess I'm trying to get a sense from staff, are there any areas in which, like an investment of some of those, I'm in alignment with Councillor Patterson, I think Paul Bell of Council. We're trying to be responsible, not using one-time funding to cut long-term, operational pieces. But are there anything here whereby, and maybe this is a takeaway, where if we invest something now, say we take some of that surplus, take $500,000, take $1 million, or even $100,000 of one-time funding, and use that to either do something with, say, Parks and Rec that could generate significant revenue to help offset, or could provide some other either revenue increase or operational cost decrease. So modernization of equipment, things like for public works that could automate some of the work that they're doing, things of that nature, that could kind of drive down our operational, short-term operation, medium-term operational costs through one-time investments. And I guess that's really my question here is there any mechanism here by which we can impact? We're already doing it in the long time frame. I'm curious if there's anything we can do over the next, say, 5 or 10 years where we can use some of this one-time surplus funding, other funding, that would have a substantive impact on operational costs, or even relatively minor impacts, but it could make a difference of 1% or something on taxes over these years. I don't know if it's a question that can be answered here, but maybe it's a takeaway for Thursday if there's any thoughts that we could reallocate some of the one-time funding that to impact some of the operational costs. I don't know if there's any, Mr. Payne, if there's anything. I'm sure nothing would pop to mind because it would have been brought forward to us as an option, but any comment?
Your Worship, that was going to be my comment. Is it would have to be something we'd have to take away and consider. Certainly, if opportunities like that came forward, we wouldn't hesitate to bring forward to council, because we do take opportunities like borrowing from our reserves to invest in the apparatus storage so that we can save interest. So when we see those, they come. That doesn't mean that our mindset is always in that space, but so nothing comes to mind immediately, and I would need to take it back. The senior leadership team would need to take it back to be able to answer it more fulsomely.
Yeah, and I know that, and just in supporting that comment, I know sort of in conversations that I certainly had with senior leadership and the CAO over the years, and it continues to this day, those details of the operational plans are reviewed constantly to look at. I just think there may be some times where the idea of, say, having $1 million to invest to do something that could meaningfully change an operational piece might not even come up in contemplation, and maybe there's something, given the operational costs that we're facing here, that maybe just think outside the box a little bit. So I'll leave that with the leadership team if there's things that can come back on Thursday. Thank you for that. Councillor Green?
I was just going to say, following on Councillor Patterson's comments, we've made tremendous inroads in the last term and part of this term as well. I would hate to lose that momentum on the priorities that we've identified, particularly infrastructure. So I understand the concern. Anyway.
All right. I think we're running low on time here. I think I don't see any other sort of questions that would drive additional information coming back for next meeting. I don't think, I'm hearing from members of council that I think if any members of council want some more time to review this and think, I'm happy to give that to them. I don't want to push that. These are not late decisions, so I think we're going to come back on Thursday, hopefully for a fairly short meeting, to go through some of the decision-making and direction. Is there anything else from any member of council before we look for, is there anything else I should ask from staff that we should be covering before we move to adjournment here tonight? Ms. Williams? Yeah, I'll let you speak.
No, Your Worship, other than to ask if there's an appetite to start the meeting at 6 so that we could probably get council out of here a little earlier the night before the 4-day long weekend.
Well, just so I'm clear, are we able to do that with a notification period? Is it just 24 hours that we'd have to give for the notification, to change that notification period? It's fine for me. I don't know if other.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah. Related to that?
It's related to.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
I'm just wondering, Your Worship, I'm not sure whether this is necessarily something that we can arrange properly, but I'm just wondering. I'm conscious that pretty much the entirety of our senior leadership team is here ready to answer questions, and so I'm just wondering if the nature of the agenda for the next meeting is to discuss primarily financial matters related to the taxes. I'm just wondering whether or not there's a way to structure it, both in terms of time and both in terms of attendance, such that the entire staff complement doesn't need to attend.
Ms. Williams, that's a good question. I certainly think they could be available only through Zoom or through Teams. And perhaps I would just ask as a courtesy to members of council, prepare questions ahead of time. And if we have any questions for the senior leadership team, ask them at the beginning of the meeting and then we can let them go. And submit them to Ms. Williams ahead of time if possible. That would be helpful as well so we can get answers. Yeah, so whatever we can do to that effect. Yes, thank you. Okay, we have yeses for sixes around to Councillor Patterson. What was the?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I think, you know, and it's been raised by the people that did actually come and attend the financial plan meeting. It's not as packed as it was last night, but nevertheless, I really appreciate certainly the comments from the people that came to the meeting. And I think because we are kind of in a stage of vulnerability with our budget still, and that will get better. That will improve over time, particularly once the capital projects start and we gain experience and knowledge and we have a better feel for things. So we're just in a difficult situation right now, but I think it is difficult economic times, and I think it would be appropriate for us to, in the context of this budget, kind of take it back to what does this mean? What would we be taking on? What would it mean in debt? Not just in, you know, the annual debt repayment, but debt per household. And what does this tax increase look like? We always go by the average house, but really, you know, perhaps kind of a below average, so we understand fully kind of the implications. I think it's important that we consider those things too in our final decisions. May not change anything, but I think we really have to understand what it means to the community. And I don't know if Director Payne can have that for us tomorrow, but it would be useful to have.
Thank you. I'm going to just leave that at this point. We're running out of time in a minute and a half, so I think it may also just be worthwhile for us to, when we come back next week, to have the framework, because there's a few other aspects. I'll say the transit levy is going up quite considerably. The CRD levy is going down this year from last year. So there's a few other mixing pieces in there. Maybe that would help just provide some context for what the overall cost impacts for the average household might be as well. Because I think we have to make a decision within that context. With that, I think I'm just going to seek a motion to adjourn at this point. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you, everybody, for coming out, including the members of the public.